All right, now we're good. We're delighted you can join us for this important training today. I'm going to start with some housekeeping items. For our in-person attendees, you'll find the restrooms if you exit this room to your left and then take your first left. Exits for the building are located at either end of the hallway. All right, now to welcome our virtual attendees. We're still letting some folks in. Thank you for joining us. We should all be acquainted with Zoom by now, hopefully. We ask that you keep yourselves on mute for the duration of the training and use the chat feature to ask questions. I will read your questions aloud to the presenters at the end of their presentation. The good news is we have been approved for 2 professional development hours for today's training. For our in-person attendees, we ask that you sign in and out with a registration form at the table outside. For our virtual attendees, we are able to monitor your attendance via Zoom, so you do not need to submit anything to us. Within 30 days, you will receive the continuing education credit certificate of attendance for your records. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself and our center. My name is Jess Eckerl, and I'm a funding specialist here at the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. I am joined today by our special in-house engineer, Susan McGrattan, and I'm sure the in-person attendees were able to meet some of our fantastic staff who are also joining me here today. And as you can see from our mission statement here, it reads that we, the EFC, work to enhance the managerial and financial capacity of local governments. And I'm going to take a moment to break that down for you. Through our multiple funding sources, we offer technical assistance to communities at no cost. Whether they're identifying or applying for funding or dealing with workforce challenges, we are able to meet them at any stage in their journey and offer assistance. This collaborative training with the USDA Rural Development is a great example. We responded to a need voiced by the USDA Rural Development team that engineers and municipal leaders needed to hear important updates on USDA requirements and regulations. So we organized this training and invited all of you to join us. By partnering with USDA RD to provide this training, we're empowering all of you to write stronger, compliant engineering reports and gain a better understanding of regulations, thereby enhancing your capacity as outlined in our mission statement. We understand that the term technical assistance can be difficult to grasp. So here's a couple examples of different technical assistance services that we offer. We help with community engagement, so helping your community stay informed on projects that you might want to bond for and move forward with. Any important messaging and outreach. We do a lot of septic system outreach and messaging on the importance of keeping your septic system maintenance up to date. We help with needs assessment and planning studies and training and professional development. We do a lot of workforce development. Project planning and development. As I mentioned, we have an engineer on staff who can review PERs and help you with needs assessments. And then funding and finance, like our funding roundtables that we host periodically. And I just wanted to mention that we're part of a national network, the Environmental Finance Center Network. We're divided up into EPA regions across the country. This center here in Syracuse serves EPA Region 2, which encompasses New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico. We offer trainings all over the country. Please visit our website to review past training events and recorded webinars. We also have a suite of resources there we add to all the time. We just had a really successful income survey training 2 weeks ago, and those slides and recording are uploaded to our website. If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with us for any of those technical services that I just went over, please scan the QR code provided and fill out a request form, and we will be in touch with you. All right, that is enough from me. On to the people that you showed up to hear from today. And we're going to start with Brenda Smith and Kim Wildman. You want to come on down. It is. Price is always right. Thank you. I will be able to do that from my laptop, so you won't have to worry about it. Just an added. Just the joys of a hybrid event. All right. So I'm just using an arrow key to advance.
Just the arrow key. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay. My name is Brenda Smith. I'm the Community Programs Director with USDA Rural Development. I've been with the agency for USDA with over 38 years, so I'm close to retirement. Kim says no, John says no. May, I can actually go in May, right? Fun. So I'm gonna talk briefly just about funding. And then Kim is gonna talk about just some already apply issues we see with applications, just some tips, and then John and Jessica are gonna be the main show with everything you want to know about the PERs. And Tom is also gonna do a hybrid. He's gonna come in and talk a little bit about environmentals. He's our SEC. No, the arrow's not gonna work. Where's it down? There we go. Just talk a little bit about funding. So for New York this year, our WEP allocation is 29,115,000. So that's loan money. On the grant side, we got 5,823,000. We have CDSs, which are congressional directed spending grants, or community project funding. They are appropriated by Congress, and those we have to fund. So out of the fiscal year 26 budget, we had, I think there was 3 projects, but it totaled 3,350,000. Unfortunately, that comes out right off the top of my allocation. So you can see the New York grant allocation for water and environmental programs this year is $2,473,000, which typically we get about 10 million. So that is 1/4 of what we normally get in our allocation. So we did take a huge hit as far as grant money goes this year. One good thing is National Office is allowing us to deobligate projects that are not moving forward for whatever reason. So we have been successful in obligating, I think 4 fairly large projects. So right now I'm working on trying to get about, if they give it all to me, between $5 and $7 million back in grant money. So I'm working behind the scenes to try to recover that money so that New York will be in a better position. Because obviously we do way more activity than $2.5 million. So it's, and right now, as of right now, I think we've got about, after the project that I'm working on letter of conditions right now, we'll have about $300,000 in grant money. So the grant money is essentially gone right now until I can get that recovery money back. But I am working with National Office to get that back. So I expect as soon as we get it back for OMB, we'll be able to get that into our account. So yeah, grant money is definitely tight this year. ECWAG nationwide, we got $14 million nationwide. PPGs, $1 million allocation nationwide. Now the pre-planning grants, the maximum award is $60,000. Search grants, which is very similar to the PPG, that also can be used for your environmental reports and your pre-planning documents nationwide. There's $2 million in that account. That is 100% grant, whereas the PPG is only 75% or up to 60,000. The search grant is for populations of under 2,500, and they have to show a financial need, and it can be 100% grant, but the maximum award is $30,000 for that. Yep.
How much is left in that
Right.
search? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you need the microphone.
You can repeat the question.
Oh, you want me to just repeat?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Candace.
I was just wondering, that was allocation of 2 million under search, and what is remaining at this stage?
As of this stage, I think most all of it. We just got our funding. So the
I see.
question was, how much is left of the search grant allocation? As of right now, we just got our funding about a month ago. Candace, I didn't look at the updated numbers, but there hasn't been a lot out the door. We just got our allocations.
Thank
They,
you.
they were delayed this year. We haven't done any search for PPGs in New York yet this year. So we get about 120,000 in each program area. So we get about 120,000 for the PPG and 120,000 for the search grants. But we haven't obligated any yet this year.
Thank you.
Rural Economic Area Partnership Zones. Again, this is what we call the REAP zones. This is only for Tioga County. It is for Sullivan County and the town of Wawarsing. It can only be accessed by North Dakota, Vermont, and New York. So this is a special set aside of money for just the 3 states that I mentioned. And then in New York, it's only for Tioga and Sullivan, and then town of Wawarsing can apply. So REAP loan money nationwide, there's 10 million. REAP grant money, there is just over 7 million. And then there's also REAP tribal, which is 6 million. That entire 6 million has been allocated to North Dakota. As far as the split right now, North Dakota is taking 25%, New York is taking 25%, and Vermont is taking 50%. Vermont has a huge project right now that I'm currently working on with them. That's going to take up a big chunk of all of their allocation, and probably some of New York's too. That's the bad side about being program director over there. I have to make sure I spend their money too, don't I? So yeah, that's a special set aside of money. So just a couple of things about the letter of conditions, the updates that we're getting from national office, and then I'll turn it over to Kim real quick. One of the things that we need the engineers to work on when you're doing your RD apply application, or you're working with your communities, national office is insisting that the letter of conditions now include milestones. What you can make up the milestones, but I kind of was talking with John a little bit yesterday about maybe what are some of the big ones. If it's a new district, obviously district formation, right? Comptroller approval. What's your milestone for reaching that? 90% drawings to the regulatory agency and to RD. Project bidding, start of construction, final completion. These national office is now requiring these to be in the letter of conditions, and they're going to be a timeline that we have got to follow up on to ensure that you're meeting compliance with those. So that is one of the big changes that they're pushing with. They're stressing the period of performance right now, especially with projects that have grant funding. So they're ensuring that you are within that period of performance time, and that you do not exceed the terms of the grant. Because the new grant agreements for water and environmental programs are now going to have a performance period, a start and an end date. You can't go past that end date without an extension or an approval by USDA. So that is one of the big changes. It's always been in place for community facilities, but the grant agreements now for WEP are now going to have a performance period that you're going to have to adhere to. One of the other changes that we're processing with the field and with the applicants is the grant agreements will not be executed at time of letter of conditions anymore. The grant agreement will be executed prior to the pre-con, because we don't want that performance period to start until you're getting ready to go into construction. Because if I have you sign that grant agreement at the time of LOC, it could be 2 or 3 years, right, before you truly get into construction. Well, you just lost that 3 years off that 5-year period. It's going to be a 5-year period for construction. So we're going to move the grant agreement to as close to construction as we can get it, so that we can capture all of that 5-year period. And I just wanted to share this with you, just if you can see it. This is one of the items that the national office wants put in the letter of conditions. They want you to certify that you will not apply for other funding, that you have no intention of applying for other funding. So they are really, I just wanted you to see how strict they're getting on other funding and other funding coming into projects. I will not be putting this in my letter of conditions. Nobody from national office is on the call, right? No, we will not be putting this in the New York one, but I just wanted to share this so that you can see how strict they are becoming on going and applying for other funding. So with that said, if you're working on an application and you know that you're going to be applying to Charlie, like for CDBG, or you're going to be applying somewhere, put that on your already apply application so I can capture that in the funding package. If it turns out you don't get it and you're not selected, then we'll have to look at doing a subsequent funding for it. But if it's not there, I can't come back later and let it come in. They're really getting strict about that. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's one of the new, they're really pushing this, so. Catherine.
Hasn't there always been something in the letter of conditions that says, you know, if other funding comes in, we have the right to reduce your funding? How is this different?
So Catherine's question hasn't there always been something in the letter of conditions? The wording that's in the letter of conditions that I use, it says, if you receive other funding, we will re-underwrite your project, and it could result in another funding package. This is actually wanting you to certify that you will not apply for other funding.
Oh.
Yeah, this says the applicant must certify that they have exhausted all other funding avenues and have no pending funding considerations from any other funding sources. Further, the applicant must certify that they do not intend to apply anywhere else for funding for this project. So they're actually wanting a certification now. Before it was kind of vague. Yes, if you went out and got other funding, then we would re-underwrite, we would look at the package, and yes, it could result in a different funding package. But now they're actually wanting certifications. So that's the difference.
I guess, is that the rationale for this, is they just don't want to go through this exercise of reevaluating the numbers and having money be obligated out of that particular state?
So the question is, what's the rationale behind it? Yes, they are looking at the fact that when you come to us, we're the last place that you're going, right? You're coming to us because you can't get funding elsewhere. So one of the requirements is you show you can't get funding elsewhere, right? Or you can't fund it out of your own resources. So they're saying once you sign that 1942-46, which the applicant signs, which basically says it's the letter of intent, right? You're going to meet the conditions of that letter of conditions. Once you sign that, National Office's philosophy is you sign that, you've basically said, I can afford this project at these rates, these terms, and this loan payment. So if you're coming in later and saying, no, I can't afford it now, then that means that, you know, you signed that you were going to do it and now you're saying you can't. So I think a lot of the rationale is that you're agreeing to that based upon signing that 1942-46.
If a municipality is trying to seek CDBG funding, which requires you to go into construction within 6 months of the award, is there a way to delay this letter of conditions in anticipation of that so that the two timelines don't contradict each other?
So the question was, if we're applying to CDBG, is there a way to delay the issuance of the letter of conditions to make sure they all kind of flow together? I think the problem with that is I think with CDBG, Charlie obviously they need to be last in. So he normally wants to see our letter of conditions, right? Before he's going to go along with the project to make sure that there's co-funding involved. I can't delay. I can certainly not obligate a project if the community wants me to not fund it, but I can't set aside the money and delay the letter of conditions. So if I issue a letter of conditions, I have to move forward to obligate the project. I mean, with my end, it's not going to really delay my end if I issue a letter of conditions and obligate the money, because it's going to be when you're ready to work with Charlie, right? And go through CDBG. So my clock is not ticking at the time of obligation until that grant agreement is executed. Then your 5-year performance period starts. When you issue the letter of conditions, you got your milestones in there. And they want money out within 5 years. So it's kind of, there's two separate things they're tracking right now. They're tracking 5 years from obligation and they're tracking 5 years from the grant agreement. So we have two different performance periods. Then we're now trying to keep under control here, because you've got the 5 years for the grant agreement that I have a performance period, and I have a 5-year performance period based upon the letter of conditions. So they're kind of running like at the same time, but they're different for different timeframes. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge until we kind of get this whole system figured out. But there is going to be two different timeframes actually running. But I mean, I can't really delay a letter of conditions unless you're delaying the funding. So if they're not funded, then somebody else is gonna be funded in their place, right? If, if somebody says, we don't want the money now, we want to wait, but I don't know what it would benefit them from. I think they would still be able to get Charlie's money, and still be able to work through the project.
Right, as long as the applicant tells us that they're going to CGB or whoever else, then you can incorporate that in the letter of conditions. Right?
Correct.
That's why I would think
Yeah.
I thought that would be the structure to make sure.
Correct. So the question
If
was,
you say that, then you can set aside and say, okay, if CDGB comes in, then she'll adjust the transfer, or she'll take that.
yeah, so the question was, can you include the CDBG in the letter of conditions? I can. And now if it's awarded grade, I can put it in the letter of conditions. I can say CDBG. If it's you're applying to CDBG, but you haven't been awarded yet, then the letter of conditions is just going to say other state fundings, because I'm not going to commit to EFC or CDBG giving you money that you're not awarded yet. So if you tell us that, we're planning on going to apply for a WIA or we're going to apply to CDBG, the letter of conditions is just going to say other state fundings, and it's just going to list the amount. It's not going to say an agency or anything, because obviously, you're not awarded yet. Candace.
This might be silly, but not silly, but if you come and you did say you weren't going for any other funding, but then your bids come in really high and you need to go out for other funding. That doesn't,
I think that's a different situation.
it's a different situation.
Yeah, I would, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Because the letter of conditions talks about if you come in under bid, then obviously that the first money that goes is grant money based upon the letter of conditions. But if you're coming in over bid, then you're either coming to us for a cost overrun or subsequent funding, or you're going to go elsewhere to try and get the money. So yeah, I think that would be, Candace's thing was if you had a increase in costs, would that be a different situation? And yeah, we would treat that differently. And that's it for me. I'll turn that over to you. Oh, I do? Yes. Oh, I'm not doing that. Sorry. I'm burning on this at 11 o'clock at night, and apparently I got my screens out of order, so I apologize.
All right, I am Kim Wildman. I am a community program specialist. I work under Brenda on her team. And I'm just going to talk today a little bit about the RD apply and why we return the applications. We have to return an application if it is not complete, which would be there's no PER uploaded or ER uploaded. The screens aren't filled out. Yes, we do see when a one pager is uploaded for the ER and it says coming soon. We do see that. We can't have that. So we will have to return that. But when we return it, we do return it for other issues as well. And one of them is the sam.gov. So if it's been expired or if the name does not match exactly, we've seen where it'll say the Village of Mexico Town Hall. It cannot have that town hall at the end. It has to be exactly the Village of Mexico. Any outdated or missing financial documents. So if the AFR is, I think what we need, the balance sheet's 6 months, but AFR is the last 2 years. If we don't have those, then we can't accept the application. We'll have to wait until they do file their AFR. If we're missing any supporting documentation as far as other funding award letters, evidence of public support. And then we do see where the incorrect roles are assigned. So if the town clerk has the rep certify role assigned to them, and we would have to return it because the supervisor or the mayor would have to be the one to sign off on the documents. This is my biggest one that I hate, but inconsistencies between RD apply entries and the PER. We see a lot of times where the number of connections don't match up, the flow doesn't match up. It creates a lot of confusion between the field. We have to ask a lot of additional questions. So we just want to make sure that those are matched up perfectly. So we don't have to send you a Form A and say, fill this out now. We also don't want to see EDU counts. We want to see connections. We do our own EDU calculation on our end for underwriting. So we don't want to see your EDU count of how you calculate the EDUs. Incomplete or outdated project costs, O&M, or short-lived assets. We see a lot of times where those do not match the PER and RD apply. And then as far as project costs go, we do want to see that itemized breakdown between the soft cost, technical cost, and then construction. We don't want it all lumped together and as one total project cost. Yes?
Yeah.
So, we recently had an application return, and it had to do with the estimate of cost of whether it was reasonable to charge, essentially, it sounded like to me, 2 people to do construction inspection for the period of time of the project. And the dollar amount was challenged by RD. So depending if you were thinking of just one construction engineer full-time or 2, it would make more sense. I don't know, I'm not sure how much they bill, but it seemed like a micromanagement at a level that I hadn't seen before.
So the question was that we challenged the cost of the engineer costs,
The construction inspector.
inspector.
And like, there isn't guidance for what's allowable costs and rates.
Was that the only reason why we returned it?
You know, I don't have the full details, but I thought it was.
That was New York?
Yes.
New York? What application?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm hoping there was a different reason why we returned it, and we
Okay.
just happened to question that at the
Maybe
bottom,
that-
just to get clarification.
The things.
Because I don't think, I would hope we wouldn't return it just for that reason.
Yeah, there were probably other things.
Yeah, there was
But
probably,
it was surprising that to comment, because it's kind of like going through, well, how much, if you took the 18 months and 40 hours, you know, assuming they're in the field inspecting it, which you like to see people, even though they're not necessarily really doing that, but you want to see a construction inspector on site all the time.
I mean, typically the specialist would not necessarily challenge the resident inspection, the construction inspector. I mean, that's something that John and Jessica are gonna look at when they do their PER review. So I don't know. Do you know the name of the project? I can go back and look.
Talk to you later.
Talk to me later. John. John had a comment.
No, I was gonna say that along with that, even sometimes during the application stage, the specialist might ask us, hey, these costs look reasonable. And we do have a range of what, engineering should cost, typically even inspection. And if the specialist asks us, hey, it's in the range or out of range, what's going on? We might have said, yeah, you could ask why, And then we would dig further within the PER, that would be true. Or when the actual application comes in, look at the costs and say, but we do look at what are they applying for engineering, total technical services, as well as admin. We'll look at it, say, it seems reasonable. It's fairly general range we have, but if it is on the high side, we're gonna ask why we've done it for us.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I can reach
It's not
out.
obvious.
Jessica.
Yeah, I've never.
Sorry, I can.
We should give John the microphone.
Yeah,
some sister.
I think Jess will go over that as well in the PER.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let's
so-
wait for that.
Okay, so to Candace's question, we'll cover that for the folks online. We'll cover that when Jessica goes over PERs, but that is something that typically the engineer would do. One of the things on the itemized cost breakdown that Kim was talking about in RD Apply. I know RD Apply lets you lump it together, but please don't lump it together, because if you do, we're just gonna send you a Form E and say, please do a Form E, and we're trying to get away from doing the Form E to be able to just use RD Apply, at least at the initial stage of the application. So, that would definitely help if you can do that. And in RD Apply is where you're also gonna put your milestones. So those milestones that I talked about earlier that need to go in the letter of conditions, there's a tab in RD Apply where you can enter your milestones. I'm not sure, can't remember what it's on, but there is a tab in there. So, and I don't know how I got these out of order, I do apologize. So another national office requirements for 26 that they're putting in place, they have increased the threshold for reserve grant funds. Last year it was 1.5% of the median household income. This year they have increased the reserve to 1.75% of the median household income. So I cannot access any reserve money if the user cost is below 1.75% of the median household income. So that is a 26 requirement in the 1780-5. Another requirement that I did not put in here, in order for me to access National Office Reserve Funds, I have to have 100% of the fiscal year 24 CDS grants applications submitted. And I can tell you right now for New York, I do not. I am missing one application. Maybe the engineer's online, I won't say the name, but I'm missing one application right now from fiscal year 24 CDS that is actually tying up my ability to access any reserve money from the national office at this point. So fiscal year 26, they put 100% CDS complete application submitted in order to access National Office Reserve Funds. I'm being told next year in 27, it's going to go down to 50% of the CDS applications on hand, but for this year, for whatever reason, they did 100%. So that is one of the required. Another thing now, in addition to, in order to qualify for grant funds, everybody knows the user cost has to be above similar systems. In addition to similar systems, National Office is now looking at cost per 1,000 gallons. So it's a calculation we have to do when we do our underwriting, but we have to look at the cost per 1,000 gallons. And in addition to being above similar systems costs, your cost now has to be above the threshold for the cost per 1,000 gallons based upon the similar systems that were obligated being used for the project. So that is something new that we're now underwriting with in the and again, it's all done behind the scenes, but just so you know that in addition to similar systems, we're now looking at cost per 1,000 gallons too.
So that cost per 1,000 gallons really doesn't have anything to do with how they're going to charge, right?
No, no,
Just you're
no.
looking at total dollars, total gallons.
Yep.
And coming up with a figure. And what is that range? I mean,
So the question was, does the cost per 1,000 gallons have anything to do with what the applicants charge or the municipalities charge? It does not. It's basically just another threshold. So when we select similar systems, we also are going to have to calculate what the cost per 1,000 gallons is for each of those similar systems we're using. So in addition to being above the monthly cost per EDU, they now have to also be above the cost per 1,000 gallons per EDU.
and what is that threshold though?
There is no threshold.
She's looking at similar systems.
Oh, I see.
It's based upon,
Similar
it's based
systems.
upon similar systems, correct?
Okay.
Correct, yeah. So it's based upon the similar systems that are selected for that project, and then we have to calculate out cost per 1,000. It's just one more thing we have to do in addition to the monthly cost. Now we're looking at cost per 1,000 gallons. So we're frantically, trying to convert all of these projects at cost per 1,000 gallons. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a challenge, but so that's just another requirement that they put in the system. So questions? There we go. Now we got it right.
Anything else for the room?
Okay. There's our contact information if you need to reach us. We're done early, John, so you and Jessica got the floor now. I will say one thing, interest rates stayed the same for April 1st, just if you were wondering. There was no change to interest rates.
What are they?
What are they?
She's cheap.
Wanna know what they are? Candace asked what the interest rates were. Currently, poverty rate is 2.875, intermediate is 3.75, and market is 4.75.
Yes, yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
Is it 2.875? 3.75.
You know what? That's okay. Interject as you please. Okay. Hi, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Jessica Dominic. I'm one of the state engineers for New York. It's myself and John Helgren, if you have not met him already. And we're going to talk about 1780-2 updates. Okay. There's a lot of screens. Okay, so 1780-2 is what we use to review the preliminary engineering reports. So we're hoping, maybe this is something you've seen before and kind of use as or considering as you're developing your PERs. but it's required for the water and waste disposal programs. It's used by applicants and engineers, and the newest edition is from September of last year. And in there, they included 4 new templates, which are kind of based on things that we already see. So as we go over that, you might be thinking, yeah, we already kind of do that, but they're for your consideration. Okay, so your preliminary engineering report describes your engineering need, alternatives, and costs. If you're looking for health and sanitary documentation, we want that in there as well. If you're looking for that designation to get a lower interest rate or maybe some grant money. And it must be sealed by a professional engineer licensed in New York. I know sometimes we see the kind of final draft ones, but if it's not sealed, we'll be asking you to kind of seal it and resend it to us. Okay, some do's and don'ts. Do write a PR that's clear and concise, about 10 to 50 pages, avoiding excessive appendices. On occasion, we do see some that are, 500 to 600 pages long, and they kind of have the ER copy and pasted in there. Not necessary for us. We will, skim through it if there's some extra stuff in there, but we like to have just really the meat and potatoes of it. We want your costs to match between the PER and the application, as Kim said. Your scope needs to be consistent between the documents. If you hand us a PER and an ER and they're for totally different parts of the town, we will be asking you to kind of, go back and get us something that matches. Same with the cost estimates. If the PER scope is describing, we're going to just put in pipe on this one road, but the cost estimate has a wastewater treatment plant on it, that's not going to fly. They do need to match up. Your O&M and SLAs need to be for the entire system, not just the project. So especially if you're working in a village, it needs to be not just for that one street, it needs to be conclusive of the whole village. And we need to discuss materials procurement. So they need to meet open and free requirements, BABA, standardization. So if you're naming certain manufacturers in your PER, we'll probably ask you to just make sure, as you go into bidding that meets open and free. Or if they've standardized on a certain, pipe material or this or that, we will ask you to kind of just let us know then also. And we are in the world of BABA now, so we'll probably ask you to just confirm that that's been considered in your cost estimate, especially if your costs seem a little low. All right, and don't give us contingency over 10% or including inflation factors. We do have to kick that back due to our national office policy. So I know I've seen a lot, I think some other funders require 30%, but that just will not fly for RD. So we suggest, if you have 15, 20%, we'll ask you to kind of add that into your construction costs. So then we can just show 10%, but the total cost doesn't change, if that makes sense. Again, we have a question here.
Can you expand a little on the BABA considerations you're thinking on working with a technology provider that will require a waiver?
Okay, so the question was about BABA considerations if we're working with a technical provider that may want a waiver. Is that what you're saying? So RD's current stance is, when we're at this point looking at the costs, we want to just make sure that, the products being used to consider, develop your cost estimate are American made products. But if you foresee not being able to get something, like I believe they were working on a pump and mixers waiver and some things like that. RD currently wants no project specific waivers if we can avoid it at all costs. They gave us an unnumbered letter that unfortunately I can't share externally, but they were talking about, if we can use de minimis, let's use de minimis. So basically, if it's, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering wrong, but it's up to 5% of project costs or $1 million
Is
the threshold for de minimis.
Yeah, and then are you talking about, when you say technical waiver from you talking about a manufactured product of some type or, okay. And they know they need a waiver? Okay. So I think you'd have to let us know that in the PER, if that's where you're at the stage or whoever it is, technically. And I think the second thing would be aware that we'll have to look at the cost, but there is, in terms of putting it under de minimis with a product and not seeking a specific product waiver in BABA, there's guidance, but there is a limit. And I have those numbers in the next presentation, but
I was gonna
but there's some numbers that they've said, okay, in general, we'd rather you put it in de minimis. But if we're talking about, it's going to blow your de minimis budget of a max million. So let's talk. So I think we'd want to discuss that with you at the time of the PER, if that's what you know. Or whatever.
Yes. And I know too, they said, especially if it's a certain product, they'll want to conduct market research with our contractor, and that can take some time as well.
Yeah, to get and I was going to talk about that in the next slide, but to get a product waiver in BABA in our agency is not fun for everybody. So that's why they're saying, and it's crazy. So I think the one thing, so there's waivers out there, let's say right now. So a product waiver has to be specific to a project in our agency. So there's waivers out there now that EPA's issued, as well as I think HUD, for some products for BABA. We can't use those. We can't even want to try to use those. They've tried. And the Office of Made in America, MEO, won't let us. So you got to go through our process, which is not fun. So as she said, if we're going to do that, then we got to go through market research, and we got to go through 3 legs of federal government to get that waiver approved. So it can happen, but it's going to take a heck of a lot of time. Yeah, if we can, but maybe we can't. So we'll see.
One thing they did mention too, John, on Tuesday on the web call is that market research contract is expiring.
Yeah, so our agency USDA had an outside contractor to help us through BABA. We had a contractor for that. That's gone. So we have to do it on our own now, which we do with our national office staff. So it's going to add time, is what they're getting to. I'd be shocked personally, so that's fine. Thanks, Jess. So that's interesting. It came out. I was going to talk about that a little more, so we'll see. We can talk about it later on too. So
Yes, so more on that later. For calculating your own EDUs, Kim went over that as well. We like to see just the connections and the flow information. So we can calculate it on our own. Please don't leave out your alternative analysis. If there's any other feasible alternatives, we want to see them. And if you're saying something is too expensive, we're going to want to see a life cycle cost analysis to back that up. But yeah, if there's other things that are just technically infeasible, like if it makes the most sense to just extend a pipe down the road, like it doesn't make sense to put in a new water treatment plant for, a road with 10 people on it. Just say that and we'll concur on that. And then cost per connection, assuming grant. So when we ask for the user cost, we want that assuming that all you're getting is loan. So especially if it is a project that ends up needing grant, we can, again, that's there to back that up of like, look how expensive this would be if we didn't receive any kind of grant funding. Yes.
A lot of engineers like to put in, maybe 4 scenarios of costs, like,
Yeah.
okay, if we get 25% grant, this is what it's going to be, 50% grant, 75, which is unreasonable, but, and then a loan only. So as long as they have the loan only option in there, it's okay to show other cost scenarios.
Yes. So
Okay.
the question was, is it okay to show other cost scenarios as long as there's a loan only shown? And the answer is yes. I say that's totally fine.
Thanks.
So as long as we have that for our underwriting, whatever else is in there is totally fine. Okay. So next, okay, alternative analysis is required for most projects. And now in the new 1780-2, they have a list of standard alternatives. The only kind of PR that doesn't need them is our streamlined PR, which we'll go over in a little bit. But as you can see there, I mean, it looks kind of small from here, but if you need a new well, there's a couple suggested alternatives, different kinds of disposal methods, treatment systems and whatnot. Okay. Short-lived assets need to be broken out as things that need to be replaced between 0 and 5 years, 6 to 10, and 11 to 15. We do not consider anything that takes more than 15 years before it needs to be replaced as a short-lived asset. But it also can't be your usual O&M item. So something that's not something that needs to be, replaced regularly, but before that 15-year mark. It's required for our underwriting and used in O&M planning. And again, must be for the entire system, not just the project. And that might look different between, a village where it's the whole system versus town districts, which are, a little more separate. But there's, some examples there of some short-lived assets we see. This list on the left is also from, or I guess maybe it's your right, but that's from 1780-2 as well. Okay, some other considerations. Something new they've added in there, which is now a requirement on the national office level, is considering cybersecurity, especially with, everything going on in the world. They want to make sure that that sort of stuff is considered, especially, mosquito systems, making sure they're changing passwords, that sort of thing. They want that included in the O&M budget, and they're encouraged to maintain some sort of contract for it. There's also collaborative delivery methods, like design build. We don't do a ton of them, but, could be an option for some communities. And the PR must reflect that they want to consider that. So, it's a little bit easier at the PR stage to say, we're planning to build this ourselves. We have the manpower for it. It's going to save us this much money versus, we're months down the line and then coming and we have to kind of readjust everything. So if that is something that the entity is considering, let's talk about it at the PR level. And like I said, they must be able to confirm that it's cost effective and that the work can be completed in a timely manner with the available labor. So as long as, doing this work isn't taking away the entity's ability to do their normal jobs, then it's okay.
CMAR?
Oh, that's construction manager at risk, right? Okay, yeah, that's what CMAR is. I've heard our other colleagues use that term. We usually just say design build.
Actually, what?
We usually just say design build, but
Okay.
I think they're very similar. Sole sourcing equipment, we don't allow it unless it's approved and they must meet the domestic preference requirements. Okay. And these are the new 4 templates. We have the interagency template, and I'll go through each of these next. The web specific template, other report with cross-reference. So if you were writing some sort of capital improvement plan for a different funding agency, but it covers all the same bases, that is what that's talking about. And then option 4 is a streamlined PER. Okay, so interagency is used when there's multiple funding sources involved. There's a full outline in Exhibit 1 of the bulletin, and it supports alignment across agencies. So this is one that I feel like it's used the most often, that you're probably already doing, even without seeing the template. But it basically it's very detailed, encompasses a lot of things, and hits, everything we need. I don't think I didn't add a picture of it, but when you look at the bulletin, you'll see it there. Option 2 is the WEP specific. It's for all WEP projects. It may not meet the other needs of federal programs. It's a little bit more concise than the interagency just because, it's tailored to us. So if you're only coming to us, this could be a good option. Generally similar to the interagency, but less info needed. Again, there's an outline included in Exhibit 2 of 1780-2. Your option 3 is using an existing capital improvement plan or a facility plan or engineering report. It includes all the information in options 1 and 2, and we may need some sort of separate supplemental information, but that can be provided in the email or cross-referenced. We're pretty flexible as long as we get the information. And then option 4 is the streamlined PER. And this is one, it's a little bit newer to us. We would want to vet the use of it. So if it is something that you're considering, let us know. And we can let you know if that's something that'll work for us. But they have example projects on there that could qualify for this. If it's just metering equipment or the replacement of a pump, valves, fire hydrants. Where's the one? Expansion of less than 5 miles or 75% increase, whichever is smaller, in a water distribution system or wastewater collection system. That's higher than it was before. I think John and I were looking it up. But yeah, basically just simple like replacement in kind or expansion projects that it's nothing crazy going on. Where there's no technical alternatives to the proposed action, there's no alternatives required, and this is Appendix B that I pulled out here. Okay, so your PER outline, project planning, we want to know the location, if there's any sensitive environmental resources there. Population trends is, are we expecting an influx of people to move into the town? Are a lot of people leaving, not really growing? And any community engagement, like have people in the district reached out and, they're really passionate about it. They want the water, or the opposite. Sometimes they get voted down because they don't want it, but we'll want to know about that. Existing facilities. So we'll want a location map. Any history, when were their last updates? Are things super outdated, deteriorating? The condition and capacity, and compliance status. Is there any notices of violation? Any other kind of, correction action plans that they're part of? That sort of thing. Your need for your project, if there's any health and sanitary issues, we'll need some sort of documentation from the local code enforcement or the health department or the DEC, whoever the regulator of the system is, to back up any issues that you put in the PER. Notices of violations are really helpful. Pictures, any of that sort of thing. Is there aging infrastructure? Has this got put in 100 years ago and has never been replaced? Probably in need of replacement. Reasonable growth. And there's examples of health and sanitary issues and acceptable documentation in Appendix E of the bulletin. Alternatives considered. Is there, what's technically feasible? What are the environmental impacts? Is there any land requirements, construction challenges, and cost estimates? And for the alternatives, for the cost estimates, we'll want a life cycle cost analysis comparing them. But again, I took most of this right from the bulletin too, so this is all outlined there. But yeah, so your life cycle cost analysis is a 20-year planning period typically, and there's a real discount rate per the OMB A94, which I believe is like 2% or something like that. But we'll want you to compare the capital, O&M, short-lived assets, and the salvage, and any non-monetary factors. So there might be something that's cheaper, but it's not sustainable. There might be real environmental impacts and stuff like that. That's something we'd also like considered. Your recommended alternative, we want you to describe the full proposed project, provide the maps and schematics where appropriate. Identify the treatment, storage, and collection. What size are we making this? A map is especially helpful, especially laid out clearly, highlighting where things are going. If you're saying you're making, a wastewater treatment plant, we might want to see, what that layout looks like, those sorts of things. We want to see a project schedule, which I guess is similar to the milestones, Brenda and Kim were talking about, but, how long do you think it's going to take to get permits? How long do you think it'll be in design? When would you like to bid? About how long do you think construction will take? And, how far are we from, startup? If there's any permit requirements, anything for construction, discharge, capacity, environmental compliance, I want those considered at this stage as well. And your cost estimate, we need construction broken down into, an itemized construction cost. So, this many feet of pipe, you know, this many hydrants. I saw one recently that all they said was construction. And I had to ask to get, you know, how many feet of pipe they're replacing and stuff like that. So having that level of detail is very helpful for us. Non-construction costs, your legal, engineering, and admin, we would like that breaking down. As well, your contingency, like I said, needs to be 10%. We can't do anything over that, unfortunately. And if the project is incorporating water and wastewater, we would need those separate. Okay. Your operating budget needs to have your O&M costs, any debt service, and reserves. So your short-lived assets and debt service all need to be in there. Oh, go ahead.
On that operating budget, and O&M cost, like, breakdown, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, sometimes I see, okay, this is gonna be the annual O&M cost in the engineering report, and then I have to break it down in RD apply, and it's not
Right.
there.
Right. I say that's a good point. Yes.
When you're doing the O&M, it's O&M at project completion, right? So
Yes.
if there's savings, right, if they're building maybe a new plant, they got a bunch of energy savings, maybe the O&M's gonna go down.
Yep.
Maybe it's gonna go up, maybe they're doing some new treatment, that needs to be taken into consideration, so you might just wanna mention that too, because we do see that sometimes.
Okay. So the first question was, do we want the O&M costs breaking down, kind of itemized? Yes. We would like to see the line items with that. The other thing that Brenda added was we want the O&M of what you expect it to be at completion. So if there's energy savings, anything like that, your O&M is actually going down. We would like that reflected at this stage. Or, you know, if it's a different treatment, it's going to cost more money. Again, we'd want to see that. So the O&M cost is for what you expect it to be at project completion. Okay. And here are some new helpful tables also in 1780-2. These are in Appendix C. I believe the top is for if you have any other capital improvement programs going on. We would like to know, you know, what's the project, you know, what's involved, and the estimated cost if known. The middle table there is to help with organizing, you know, your number of connections, type of connections, and how we're looking for your flow data. So could be helpful. And the last one is looking at, you know, your O&M, what it is currently and what it's projected to be. So same thing, kind of what Brenda was talking about. And does anyone have any questions? I say, oh, do you have a question?
Could you go back to that slide?
Yeah. Yep. Question is, can we go back? Absolutely. Yes.
So these are recommended or required or?
Recommended, but not required. Let's say a lot of what we see coming in right now works for us. You know, just bringing down the connections, as long as we're not only given EDUs, because like we keep saying, we have to calculate them ourselves. But could be a nice way, you know, if you know, a village or town is struggling with organizing that, this is a pretty simple way of, you know, putting together the numbers. Okay, let's go for it.
All right, we have some good questions from online. If we have a PER that meets Environmental Facilities Corporation requirements for contingencies and includes an alternatives analysis, can we submit that or do we have to modify it?
You are welcome to submit it, but if the contingency is really high, we will be commenting on that and asking you to change it. But there's no, like, you don't have to formally submit like a PER amendment or go back and change the PER. We will look at and consider what you have already.
Great, thanks. The next question is, can you discuss TA, technical assistance for RD apply? We are finding applicants are having trouble getting authorized and working with TA has not resolved these problems. So are there resources for RD apply?
I believe that's a
Okay.
Brenda question.
Here, Brenda.
The fun IT stuff?
Good question. Yeah.
Okay, so, already apply. If there's technical issues, I am the point of contact. So you can always reach out to me. So you can reach out to me, you can reach out to my staff, you can email, there is a help desk. If you go to the help desk, then they're just gonna end up routing it to me. So it ends up with me anyway, so, just email myself or any of my staff and we can try and walk you through it, if there's questions.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, just kidding. You're not done with me.
All right, several EFCs nationwide are taking advantage of engineering assistance that EPA has made available for communities that we are working with to apply for state revolving funds. But their applications may have also been submitted for other programs such as rural development. Assuming this is happening in New York, has this caused any problems? If so, is there any advice? Several EFCs are taking advantage. EPA has. That may have been a comment.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, we'll circle back to that.
Okay.
Yep.
That's-
Thanks, Jess.
Yes, no problem. All right, and there's our contact info there. And now, environmental, yeah, are we taking a break or are we going to Tom?
So we're a little ahead of schedule, but let's keep our break. Let's keep our 15-minute break so we can do one more sound check with Tom. He'll be presenting remotely. So we have some, for our in-person folks, we have granola bars and cookies out there to do a little blood sugar. Bring it back up. And then we have 2 more presentations.
I'm on the 20, so it's like, here's your, staff, but no. So how's it supposed to go? Just gonna hold steady instead of what our office said. So what's happening right now? So like we're doing project. Southern Tier Exchange, that's what we'll down there. Southern Tier Exchange, they picked it up. For free, but they still need a contractor. So like, Southern Tier Exchange. So contact the Southern Tier Exchange. Yeah, like, they'll be like, okay, like, you have to do some busy, pay $100. Go, please.
How do you use this? We have to exit out and go back to Zoom.
Jess, can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good, Tom. Thanks.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
All right, welcome back. Up next, we have Tom Lacko with environmental review updates. Tom, just let me know when you're ready for your slides to be advanced.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so welcome everyone. As you heard, my name is Tom Lacko. I am the State Environmental Coordinator for New York. I also have the pleasure of covering Vermont and New Hampshire until further notice. Just wanted to go into a few things. The goal of this training is to ensure consultants preparing environmental documentation understand the current federal policy environment, how recent changes affect the environmental review. I just want to clarify some expectations of consultants, as well as discuss some common deficiencies that oftentimes delay the acceptance of our environmental review. Next slide. Over the past year and a half, there's been several federal policy regulation changes that have occurred that affect the environmental documentation and how it should be prepared. Many of these changes have been very confusing. Rules have not been finalized. There hasn't been a lot of clear guidance and a lot of misunderstanding out there. Many of these changes actually led to people believing that the environmental review process wasn't required. Next slide. So I want to clarify a few of the changes. The National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, itself has not changed. NEPA is still a law. It still requires federal agencies, including RD, to evaluate environmental impacts before making program decisions. What has changed is Council of Environmental Quality regulations and guidance. The Council of Environmental Quality issued government-wide rules on how NEPA was implemented. It was an overarching umbrella which guided all federal agencies on the process. And recent executive orders required Council of Environmental Quality to rewrite and rescind large portions of NEPA regulations. Because the Council of Environmental Quality rule changed, USDA had to issue its own NEPA procedures. We've been working on that over the past year. Now we will be using a USDA-wide rule at 7 CFR 1B. And the reason why this had to be changed is the old regulation, which was 7 CFR 1970, was rescinded because of the changes based on the Council of Environmental Quality rules. So since they no longer apply, we're in the process of rewriting our rules and regulations. NEPA obligations remain. The process may look a little different, but NEPA still requires determining whether actions qualify for categorical exclusion or if they need to require an environmental assessment or an EIS. We still have to evaluate environmental effects and coordinate with federal environmental laws. But the specific steps, definitions, timelines, and documentation requirement will now follow the new regulations under 7 CFR 1B, not the old Council Environmental Quality system. So the bottom line is NEPA is unchanged as a statute. The regulations are still in place for NEPA procedures, and USDA has updated the rules to match those changes. Next slide. Okay. I think I was behind a slide. I apologize for that. I had to make some changes because this new regulation was only signed or only published last Friday. So you could advance one more slide, please. Okay, one more, sorry. Okay, so main changes is that federal environmental review process will shift to agency-specifically implementation. So now RD has its own separate environmental process, rather than relying on the one that the Council of Environmental Quality had as an overarching umbrella. So, as I mentioned, as of last Friday, USDA finalized and published this new regulation. They're currently in the process of rewriting staff instruction and guidance on how to implement these changes. My understanding is that we will have separate guidance that will also be available for applicants and consultants on this process. There will be a transition time. We have been kind of in a limbo period over the last year on if we're using the new regulation, which was an interim final rule, or if we will be using the old 1970 regulations. This is evolving as we speak. I really, apologize for not being able to have something that is clear, but, it is a process. In this transition, I don't see much changing as far as what consultants have been providing in the past. There are a few things, and we'll get into that here with a couple slides moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about what we do know has changed. At this stage, we're confident that these changes to flood risk evaluation requirements, environmental justice analysis will no longer be part of NEPA documentation, and intergovernmental review procedures have also been revised for interpretation for if the state would require that or not. Next slide. Okay, floodplain considerations, updated requirements. Floodplain impacts are still part of the environmental review. Projects must identify floodplain areas, follow applicable floodplain management requirements. However, expanded federal flood risk evaluation standards are no longer required. Key changes are that the Federal Flood Risk Management Standard, or FFRMS, was rescinded back in January 25th or 25, and FEMA FFRMS implementation was ceased back in March of last year. So what this means is that we're reverting back to the 100-year floodplain for non-critical facilities and the 500-year floodplain for critical facilities. Environmental reports should still incorporate basic flood resiliency measures and should reference in the ER and PER as well. Environmental reports should still incorporate flood resiliency measures. This is part of critical infrastructure that needs to be evaluated, and looking at this to see if it is still fitting a categorical exclusion or would need to be elevated for an environmental assessment, which then would also require floodplain public notices. We still encourage evaluating these projects if they can be elevated at a higher elevation. I understand that that sometimes poses additional cost, but flood resiliency should still be analyzed or looked at. The 100-year and 500-year floodplain for these structures are the minimums that we're looking to plan for and need to be evaluated in the environmental report. Okay, next slide. Okay, environmental justice analysis was previously included in many environmental reviews. Recent executive orders have made this requirement that rural development no longer requires this. Consultants should be aware that state and local review processes may still require that. If other agencies require environmental justice, rural development requests that the materials be provided as supplemental attachments and not included in the NEPA analytical narrative. Next slide. Okay, the environmental documentation in these reports should focus primarily on direct impacts associated with the proposed project. The goal is to evaluate environmental conditions at the project site, identify potential impacts, document consultations, and resource agencies where required. Next slide. So, although certain federal policies have changed, the environmental laws that apply federally funded projects remain in place. Environmental reviews still must demonstrate compliance with the laws, such as listed here in this slide, as others. These are just some of the key statutes that we are requiring to have in the environmental reports. Agency consultation requirements also remain unchanged. Next slide. Okay. catching up here. Um, Intergovernmental review. An interpretation of the regulations changed about a year and a half ago, and New York State does not participate as a single point of contact state. So intergovernmental review for RD projects in New York are not required. Each state has separate regulations on this. So New York does not require it. Other states may. If you're doing projects in other states and doing environmental reports for them, you should check and verify if they are a single point of contact state or not. Next slide. So in summary, environmental review process is evolving towards a more agency-specific framework. Environmental documentation should focus on procedures and funding for the funding agency and direct impacts for the project. At this time, environmental laws and consultation requirements remain in place and must be addressed during environmental review. Next slide. So now I want to get into some of the common mistakes in environmental reports that we find that delay some of our review and require some back and forth. Many times we're seeing projects that are not all-inclusive. Reports should show components, staging areas, construction methods, all potential areas of potential effect. To reiterate what Kim had said, and I think Jess had also mentioned, that these need to be in the PER, the ER, and they need to match. We've found many times where when reviewing the PER, the scope of what's in the PER does not match what's in the ER. So I'd really strongly advise that that's reviewed prior to submitting. If we have concurrent reviews and one is approved and then one gets held up and then we find out that the scope is different because of the timing of when they're done, it just delays projects and delays our approval. Find occasionally, I know applicants will apply for a project and it will be, pulled back because of funding or they just didn't have it in their budget or didn't get approved. And then we'll see an environmental report that shows up that's 5 years old. And, if we're going into a report that's 5 years old, it really should be, excuse me, updated prior to us receiving it for review. Missing consultation documentation. A lot of times we receive an environmental report the same time that it's submitted. It's the same time that all the letters were submitted to permitting agencies to identify, the permits. The environmental report should really have that included in there. And not all projects would require any correspondence, but if they did require correspondence with permitting agencies, it should be identified in there and that correspondence should be included. As well as not having that may cause future delays if we find out that permitting agencies have an issue or can't issue permits for certain portions of the project, then we may have to have a new environmental review because of alignment has changed or, the scope has changed on how they're going to implement the project. Lack of site-specific information. For example, projects, if we have a water system project where they're installing new mains, but they're doing some upgrades to the treatment plant and they're installing a new water tank, they don't provide resource maps and analysis for all the different components, only for maybe, the water treatment plant site. Really need to have an explanation of what the current condition is. Is it wooded? Does it need to be cleared? What is that status? A real clear, definitive picture of what's out there. If I can review this environmental report and not have to be out on site to know what's going on, that's really what I want to be able to see in the report so we can analyze what that potential impact is. Oftentimes see maps with, not identifying where the full area of potential effect is. They're just, put into the report and not identifying the layout of, all the components. And also, seeker or the State Environmental Quality Review is not an environmental report. I've had some that, they're applying for state funding and they've gone through seeker and they just submit that for their report. RD requires, a narrative write-up and analysis of, what the impacts are. Secret documents can definitely be a supporting document included in the appendix, not just reference that, seeker is the environmental report. Next slide, please. Okay, Section 106, National Historic Preservation Act requires federal agencies to evaluate undertakings that could affect historic properties, and consultation with the stakeholders need to take place. Environmental reports I'm seeing that come in and they haven't even started the 106 process, or they've submitted the environmental report the same day they submitted the letter to or submission to State Historic Preservation Office. We really need to have that started early in the process. It needs to be started. It needs to be provide the detailed narrative. The narrative that's provided when submitting this to SHPO should match the scope. I found that a SHPO letter in the environmental report that cleared a project didn't include the entire project that was being reviewed for the PER or the ER. So we need to make sure that those match. So when we're getting concurrence with them, that it is the same project that we're looking at. Let's see. Also want to reiterate that the 106 process, even though RD does have the potential to fund a project through the National Programmatic Agreement, which allows us to obligate funds to a project prior to finalizing our 106 review. That is not to be the norm. We need to try and have these consultations with with SHPO and the tribes completed, finalized, if at all possible, prior to funding. When we don't, it could cause delays, cost overruns when we find out that they may have to do rerouting, changes in the scope, and then that may have to go back to incurring more expenses to have updates to the reports and the designs. So if we can have that completed, finalized prior to obligation, that is our preferred approach. Section 7, okay, under Endangered Species Act, this should be started as early as possible in the process. When it's submitted, I ask that, if it is an RD application, that you include me in on the project. A lot of times I'll request it later, which is not a big deal, but it does delay me finalizing a review. Please add that there is a federal nexus to the project, because that does alter some of the results when completing some of the determination keys. Make sure that all determination keys are completed for all listed species when applicable. And update that prior to submitting. There's been a lot of changes to the determination keys. Unfortunately, some of these updates have required us to go into informal consultation, where before it may not have, based on some of the questions. One that's really coming up lately is on the D key for the bat. There is anything that answers that there's drilling for directional boring, it would end up kicking those to informal consultation. So if you can look that up and realize, that that's going to have to take place sooner rather than later, because that does delay us being able to finalize these if later we need to have a biological assessment or if we need further information. When these reports are being developed, I would ask that, the consultants add additional write-up. When we have an impact to a species where we can't get a no effect, and there's a may affect or affect determination, the environmental report should include detailed information on, how we can mitigate that, what's being proposed, if there's any alternatives. So that way, when informal consultation does begin with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have as much information up front as possible and don't have delays going back and forth to gather additional information. State wetland regulations. I'm not even going to get into this. I was going to talk a little bit more about it, but I think we need to stay tuned because due to some recent findings with a court case, the new state regulations may be in flux. One thing I'd emphasize for any of these projects is identifying soils for our project area, making sure that if you have hydric soils and we're doing anything structurally that, more than likely that's going to require a wetland delineation. So having that in the environmental report, as well as outlining all those soils for the full scope of all the components of the project would be beneficial. Grouping projects. Oftentimes we have these projects that are staged, going to be done in multiple phases. When we get these, there's potentials for affecting the timeline of the review. An example is, if we've got a water district where they're doing 3 different sections over time, but they're only applying for one. If the environmental report was looking at that one and the impact to just that one, they may be able to get through Section 106 or Section 7 very easily. But then the expanded project, which has more linear distance or a larger scope area of impact, if that ends up triggering further review, further consultation, it has the potential to delay the project. And that if we can separate that out to only what's being funded, one, it makes the environmental review process go faster and also potentially reduce any potential delays because of that. Okay. And that pretty much wraps it up for what I've got. If you want to, next slide. And if anybody has any questions along the process, please reach out sooner rather than later. I'm always trying to schedule appointments, where we can have a discussion and just, get some of these things wrapped up earlier if someone has a question instead of just submitting the plan and waiting for the review to come back. Any questions?
I have one from online. How do you determine 500-year flood plain in locations where FEMA does not map it?
Okay, that is a good question. There are various approaches to that. We actually have outline guidance on how to come up with that information. Some of it is if we can identify it based on using soils, using historical data, using local floodplain administrator information, sometimes referencing that with DOT elevations. So it is very, very specific to the site, specific to what's available, and also specific to what type of project it is, to what level would be acceptable. Without that, it really comes down to surveying to determine what that floodplain elevation would be. If you've got any specific projects where that comes into play, like I say, reach out and we can make sure we get a definitive answer on what the best process would be to document what that elevation would need to be at.
Great, thank you. I don't have any other online questions. Anything from the room? No? All right, thanks a lot, Tom.
All right, thanks.
Contact info. All right, Candace, yes.
What is section 7 of in the Fish and Wildlife bit? It just said section 7. But section 7 of what?
It's the endangered species there.
Of the endangered species.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You ready?
Yeah.
Did you want to expand upon that, Tom, at all? Candace asked, section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. Were you just looking for the document, Candace, or did you have a
I
question?
just wanted it in my notes.
Got it.
I know, I figured that that's what it was about, but I
Mhm.
wanted to know the title of I don't do these regularly, so. I
Sure.
didn't realize what that was.
Yeah, and this is a good time to remind you, all the slides will be uploaded to our event page. Yeah, and we are recording this training. That will be available on our EFC YouTube channel as well. I'll send a follow-up email to all participants.
Question, we had a few people that couldn't
Yeah.
register.
Okay.
couldn't show up, Wouldn't be able to have, but would like to see it later.
Oh, yes. So,
They could YouTube site.
yes,
as
they can,
well-
exactly.
As well as could they go somewhere to find our slides?
Yes, the event page. So you know what, I'll send the information to all registrants. But just a reminder that only participants in today's training are eligible for the PDHs. But yes, I will make, Sure, all the training information will be readily available. Here. You sure you're gonna stand?
Yeah.
Okay.
I start wondering and yelling.
You might, well, you'll eventually, yeah, let's see. And then I do this to go back and, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm John Helgren, one of the state engineers. And so I was talking earlier, but didn't show my face maybe. So that's fine. So here I am. For those online, folks in the room, they know me, so, or have seen me. So so you've heard a little bit, we've had two major updates in terms of engineering items come up in the last couple of years. So one was our PER guidance. That was the 1780-2 that Jessica primarily went over. So that just happened last fall. And actually our national office, so we actually, if you don't know, each state, typically stated, there's some combo states, has an office and technical staff, state engineers, so other states do too. So then we have when I refer to national office, we actually have a team of engineers that are in Washington, D.C. that guide us, help us provide technical assistance to us when we have questions. And they're the ones that come up with a lot of these, the bulletins actually you see through some input that we've had. So we had the PER one. So the other one that was new, which was in 2024, was our 1780-26. So bulletins from rural development are what we're able to provide the public, and primarily our technical providers like the consulting engineers we work with, but others, environmental consultants, if it will, and our financial people. But the guidance of what we need of projects, whether it be in documentation, and specific for these, obviously the PR, but then for contract documents that are going to go out to public bid, as well as engineering agreements. So the 1780-26 covers that. We've had these bulletins, like I said, in the past, they come up with regular updates. Seems like every 4 or 5 years, somewhat. I'm trying to remember when the last PER one was. I think it was 2013. And this one, the last one was actually, I want to say 23, but they had one at 2018, then it jumped up. When Baba kicked in, we had to update it. And then they did this final update in 2024 to encompass some, actually primarily what this one changes is adding in some engineering agreement info, since now we're going to be on, you'll see we're on the 2020 EJCDC engineering agreements, and we're still on the 2018 EJCDC, the construction series. So just some things here. Let's see, acronym. Well, I thought I'd add an acronym page. So, because this is always a challenge maybe for some folks, and I feel bad because we throw them out as a federal agency like anybody else, all these little acronyms. So what you're going to see, and in some of the of these bulletins though that come up, you'll see WWD or WEP or RUS and RD, and this is what they stand for. So obviously, as USDA, we're a Department of we're a department within the federal government. RD is an agency, and then within RD, there's three. I don't think Brenda's thing. Sometimes she gives you a summary of what we are, but there's three groups in rural development. There's rural utilities, RUS. There's also our business program and our single family program. So we're within the RUS group. And so the rural utilities. So actually at the national level, they also fund electric and telecom programs, which we do nothing at the state level for. We're only involved with the water and wastewater. So then we have this other program within that called Water Environment Program. But then sometimes they'll refer to it as WWD, for water, wastewater disposal projects. So just to confuse you, sorry, but I was hoping to just give you, if these things come up, this is what you see. But if you ever have a question, let us know what, like what's WEP, and then even this kind of cross references with some federal, state groups. So, like I said, sorry for the confusion, but just trying to clarify what you might see. So our new bulletin are the newest bulletin, 178026 for contract documents and engineering agreements is at that link. And if you can't ever find it, let us know. We can help you with that. So it's how, as I said, it's what we need for modifications to contract documents for our projects that are funded, as well as engineering agreements for us. And I will say that we found these typically go across lines pretty well with our funding partners from EFC or CDGB. They usually just they have to add in their info, and actually that's one way you can do with ours. We'll talk about that. So they're there. So here's the initial, what it covers, the outline, the date telling you. A big thing is that things have to meet this. We've had a year grace period since 2024 for engineering agreements. So as of May of 25, we're supposed to be getting engineering agreements that meet the 2020 EJCDC. So be aware of that. So if we get an agreement, I think we have some flexibility based on when, sometimes they've submitted them already with the application. We might not even looked at it until construction. There is a gap sometimes that you'll see what we do, that you've submitted, we hope, but when the project is funded, you might have submitted an engineering agreement at that time. That's part of the letter of conditions. And we, as engineers, Jessica and I look at them and give guidance to our specialists and concur on them. We may not look at them till we actually get to the plan stage. So it might take some time, but anything you do from here going out, if you're going to have an engineering agreement that involves a rural development project, go to these 2020 agreements. That's what we need. And that's the updates for that are in here. Trying to think, the references are obviously this bulletin, but also, so we're referencing our own regulations, which is 7 CFR 1780. You can look that up right in the Federal Register, and that's what governs rural development in terms of what we do. And so a lot of what's buried in there is what comes out in these bulletins and guidance to you folks, as well as the 2 CFR 200. That's the federal OMB guidance, I think, are requirements for any kind of grants that are, I believe it's only grants, it's not loans, but I'm trying to remember. But a lot of what we do is guided by that, whether it is grant or loan, that's within that. And some of what you see comes out of that we'll talk about. And then, as we said, we've standardized, we ask for the use of EJCDC. We actually have some of our national office people sit on EJCDC's board, if you will, or a guidance that they have, and work with them on the documents. And then Jessica and myself are definitely references, hopefully you can call us anytime and ask, well, what do we do with this? So the new bulletin, what we said, like I said, gives you requirements, guidance to put in the EJCDC. It replaces the previous version, which was the 23/4, which kind of had AIS and alluded to BABA. Now we have full BABA. The main thing is, so we're still using, as I said, 2018 C series for construction and 2020 E series for engineering agreements. So be aware of that. Consulting engineers, which is a lot of you folks here and online, are really the people that implement our projects, and we appreciate that greatly. And we rely on you to use these and go and documents. And so again, any questions, or if you're confused by something, don't hesitate to call us and we'll try to walk you through. So the bulletin, obviously, the main purpose is so that we can get procurement procedures, public bid, if you will, and then also for engineering work to meet as I mentioned, our own regulations, as well as the governing regulations above that for the use of money that we loan out or give out as grants. So that's really what the bulletins, the intent of it is. But one of the big things, just so you're aware, is consistency. So somebody often, I don't know, once in a while I get asked, why, as a consulting engineer, I was one, And it's like, why do I have to use this EJCDC thing? Some of it seems like a pain, or it's like, you know, way overboard, too many pages. I got a simple project. We have our own specs. Can we use that? One is, yes, you could use that. You know, your own what they are, and they might even mimic that or some other type of thing. Spec, but that the main thing is we're trying to provide consistency. So by us standardizing on the use of EJCDC, we can say, okay, this is going to be consistent across our state as well as the country for the projects we're involved in, so that we don't have to worry about, you know, is something coming in that we don't understand or know as a funding agency. Two is, you can use your own documents. I've never had anybody do that. And I think the reason, just because they're okay, they lived with EJCDC, but two is, you can do it, but we have to give it to our own attorney to look at. So it takes time. So if you wanted to quote, use your own docs, you'd have to submit them to us. We have to look at them, kind of vet them. You have to add all the stuff to it that we ask you to do just simply in the EJCDC. And then I'm going to say it's going to take months to get approved through our attorney, because they are incredibly busy. And I think they would be put off by, why don't they just use the standard documents and buy them? So just be aware you can, but I've never had anybody ask. So we're trying to have consistency. That's what this slide is. So I jumped ahead of myself. So anyways, so mainly the bulletin, and there's 3 ways you can use what's in there, but you're editing the EJCDC documents. We're asking you to do that and add some of the additional information in there, primarily the, if you will, some of the BABA language that we want to see inserts. So EJCDC documents, consulting engineers, you probably know how to get that better than I do, but typically you go to EJCDC site and can purchase it right there, and that's what you do. There is some other affiliated agencies that can provide that. I'd have to say, if it were me personally, I'd just go straight to EJCDC, because you can get our rural development edits straight through that. But the main thing is we can't hand the documents out. They're copyrighted. You're supposed to go through EJCDC. There's a process to do it, and you have to do that. We can't just give you the documents. This is from the EJCDC site, just telling you, it's a little bit small for here, but I think if you pull it up, but you can go there. That was a link to, hey, here's the rural development info, and it is there. So you could pull up and say, okay, I want rural development documents, both for the C series, the 2018 series. So it has all the edits in there, as well as the engineering agreements. Those edits are in there too in the 2020. So you can buy that as a package. What I look for, what you should see if you get the set from EJCDC, you should see this as a footer. And oh boy, is there a little does this work? Is it the middle one, or which one? Or is it probably the red one and I can't even see it? Oh, look at that. I like it. This is even better. So if you get the EJCDC, you should see this footer. And what they're saying is, hey, we're covering the 2023 edits as well as this new edition. Some of the ones that I see typically only have the 23, to be honest with you. And that is actually, I've talked to my national office, it's okay. The only thing they really updated with these 18 version is the supplementary conditions. We'll talk about that a little bit, but I think we can deal with that. But you should at least at a minimum have this footer that says, hey, we're good through 2023. But if you buy them right now, this is the footer you're going to see. And if you don't see that footer, you don't have our edits. So there's 3 ways that you can, so in our package of the bulletin, there's these requested edits. So there's 3 ways you can do it. As I said, you can ask for the edited version from EJCDC. You get that. You're pretty much done. You can slip them into the contract documents. You can make all the edits yourself. I think we have some firms that do that, and they're pretty fastidious doing that. I'm amazed, but they get them all in there, and that's fine if they want to. And if you do that, we ask for a red line version, basically. So you put those edits in, red line them, and make sure that we can see, yes, you highlight that we do, and then we tell you for the final document, go ahead and do that, take that as a thing. Lastly, you can just do it as an attachment in each section. So you pull out if the supplementary conditions need it says in the bulletin needs this, you can take that and slip that right in behind your standard conditions and supplementary conditions that you develop. And that's okay. And that's more in line with what, I know EFC and CDGB does. They have you just slip in their package, and you can do that with us if that's what you prefer to do. So either of those three options is fine. This last one I rarely see. I'd have to say 99% of what I see, Jess and I see, is someone's bought our version and put it in. Once in a while, we'll see somebody that made the edits themselves. Rarely have I had someone put the attachments in. So, yes.
I'm
Catherine.
glad you mentioned EFC. So basically, the core of this document would also be EFC requirements. Engineers usually attach the terms and conditions, the specific terms and conditions that EFC requires.
So the question was, would this package meet what EFC needs? And I think in terms of the specific EJCDC documents, yes, I can have my colleagues here from EFC confirm it. Yeah, Liz is shaking her head. Thank you. But I think you're gonna, for a co-funded project, you're gonna have to have their specific attachments, their package that comes in, which is specific to the type of project they funded. That I know, right, Liz? So okay.
We don't really care so much the format that you use, as long as it's clear what's the scope of services, what's the fee, and doesn't include EFC terms and conditions. And then for us, did you procure your services with AE procurement, the federal AE procurement?
Okay.
Those are kind of the key things to look for. So if it's EJCDC or something else, to us, you can do whatever you want. We're just looking for those other elements.
So the question is, EFC and Liz is here, Richie from EFC, that they would actually accept, you would accept non-EJC documents if it were not funded by us, you know, which we would too, but then you're going to have to go through our attorney review. So like I said, we've never seen it. So I want to say I've never seen a project where there was an issue using EJCDC with a co-funder like EFC or CDGB. As long as you had their information in, they're going to ask you to, because they're going to review it as well. So, okay. What else did we say here? I'm trying to remember all this. That's what I'm saying is, so any other edits that you want to do to the EJCDC documents is fine. We just ask, put them in a red line. Let us look at it when we review it, so we can just confirm, like, you might want to change something. I've seen it often, and rarely is it an issue, but if it's something, probably more if it's a legal issue, we would probably need somebody to look at it. So it might take a little time, but again, this is rare, but I've seen somebody just modify something, and it's a pretty straightforward modification. Not a big deal, but if you do or have a question, talk to us about it and we can look at it. So I think one of the big things to be aware of, we stress actually in our pre-con meetings, is just making sure you guys make all these edits for for the owner, for your person you're working for, the people you're working for, but really these set up, we're not a party to the contract. So when these go out, yes, we've told you we want them to look like this as well as our other funding partners, but it's a contract between the owner, you know, your municipality typically, and the contractor. And so this was guidance, we wanted this, but anything that needs to be worked out contractually, the owner and the contractor need to work it out. And as you know, if you've had problems with a construction project, that once in a while comes up, but you work it out. And we just would ask, you know, if there's something to do with money or something to do legally, that you check in with us and make sure that it's going to make sense for us. So we're not a party to the contract, but we're making you do these changes. So thank you. So anyways, again, excuse me, just reiterating, 2018 C series, the E series for engineering, I guess it expands from 20 to 22. I didn't realize that. But there's also a small project contract, and we're going to talk about that. That was added in with this bulletin, this C522. I think it won't be used much in New York, but we can talk about it and see. So just so you know the process. So you've developed, consulting engineers have developed the contract documents, put together the package that is going to be reviewed by agencies for approval from them as well as us, and then go to bids. So the process would be, you know, you submit it to us. We only want PDFs. We don't want hard copies anymore. We used to ask you for 1 million copies. don't send anything to us. We don't need it. Just email. And most of the times I get them from our consultants by, you know, some type of file transfer protocol. That's fine. Email, whatever works. If we can't get it, we'll tell you, hey, I couldn't download off the site. Can we do something? We're going to provide, the state engineer, Jessica and myself, we're going to provide a memo to our specialist of our review, and then they're going to forward it on to the engineer and the owner, the municipality, with probably some other information, usually, maybe not, but meaning that relates to what's needed for what we call prior to bid. Hey, here's some more information. We need these documents, but here's the state engineer's review. Now, you can always call us directly to ask questions and do that, but I'm just saying we're working through our specialists because they're the key point of contact for any of our projects. And we're actually acting as a consultant to them. So you know our role as state engineers, we're the technical service provider for our staff. So we're helping them out. So I guess the point would be as well, if you're going to correspond or ask questions, copy our specialists, work through them as well. You can go directly with us, but we're going to pull them in if you haven't. So just be aware of that. But they actually, then you're going to hopefully adjust if we need some adjustments, which typically is some minor ones. I want to say 90% of what we see, even 99%, you've added all the things that we needed. We just needed a few fixes, maybe a separate type of bulletin, a new typical thing is a new sign. But you make those, you know, we're good for you to go to bid from a technical standpoint. But just be aware that if it's for a municipality to go to bid, you need to hear from the specialist of the project, not us, the engineer. If we say it'll be good to go to bid, that's great, but do not go to bid until the specialist from rural development tells you to go to bid, not the state engineer. That's what I'm trying to stress here. And do provide us then, once you go to bid, the final documents that you went to bid with. We'll need those as well as any addenda. And we're supposed to review them. That's actually what this bulletin says. I'll be honest with you, I hardly ever see any addenda till the end. So, boy, if you think you got a controversial addenda, please let us know. No, submit it. Usually I don't see any issues. It's just cleaning something up. But just be aware you're supposed to give them to us and let us know before you send them out so we can make sure that they're okay. In the bulletin, in the 17-826 bulletin, there's a checklist for you to go through on the documents of what we need in there. So use this as a checklist. It's a pretty good thing, and I often do. I use it to go through. Most of these I have memorized, but not all. But and you'll see some red lines through the big changes that happened in the last year. So since this document came out, since early last year, two things. They were two forms. We used to have 3 magic forms. Now we got 1. So that the contractors to fill out. We had these other forms that were documents that we required the contractor to fill out and submit to us, to you folks. And then we see at this time, you cross those off. So it's this, and we still see them in there. You're just, when I review the plans, just now you're going to get a comment that says, hey, we don't need these 2. It's the RD 400-6 and did I cross off the wrong one, Jess? I did. I was bad. Look at that. I must have been half asleep when I did this. Holy smokes. This is stupid. So I will change this one. Sorry, folks. So it should say the 1048. That's what we don't need anymore. We still need the 1940Q. So all these ancient rule forms that have to do with stuff, but obviously, so you see, they cover certain federal regulations, and we need to have them in there. So I apologize. I will fix this. So the rest is all you'll see from the bulletin, blah, 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 that we get. You know, make sure we're using all the 2018 documents. This is really important. Now, it may seem funny because we still get some with 2013 documents in. And it's like, what's the big deal? Is there a big difference? Sometimes there isn't, sometimes there is. And I don't know if I had anybody with what's the newest version out? Isn't it 20? There's a new construction series out, I thought, that we haven't even adopted yet. But my point is so you would think it's not bad, but we have our own accounting group, our own bean counters from our federal agency that come through and look at our projects, look at our files. And they've come up and said, oh, they used the 2013 version. Wrong. You shouldn't have let them do that. Do not do that again. we've got cited for that. This is called our ICR review, internal compliance review. So just be aware, it's not really that I don't want you to, it's more that we got hammered for it. So that's why we're telling you, we got to have whatever we told you, which is 2018 in there and nothing else. And that goes through when we go, we get to construction and you want to, and pay apps. And all of a sudden we get the first pay app and the pay app's on an AIA form or the pay app's on a 2013 EJCDC. We cannot accept that. And so it's not just what's in here, it's what you end up doing at construction time, or a change order has the wrong form. We got to use these 2018 until they tell us no. So for now, this is what it is. So the main thing is we're adjusting, you can see the advertisement, the instruction of bidders, bid form. Those are the main things, the EGC forms that we have you adjust. And each one gives you some specific, you can look at that in the advertisement, the instruction to bidders. I think the main thing with this one that I see issues with, and I think I'll talk about it in a second. Let's keep going here. So this is the one where I said, this one I did do right. So basically it's saying cross off, we used to say, and in the bulletin that you have right now, if you get this bulletin, it says put in the bid form, put in paragraph G and H. We're going to ask you now to take those out. Those have been removed. So that one's correct. So in the actual agreement form, there's a few things you can change. There's not much to do there, but we do ask you clarify what you're going to put in for liquidated damages. And I would make the one thing I sometimes do ask, if it's a little on the high side of what we think, and that's again a rule of thumb just out there. But I've seen anything from $800 to $5,000. So if it's probably on the 5,000 end, we're going to say, okay, why? And we're going to say, make sure you got some documentation of how you came up with that number. Because if it does come down to it, you're going to have, somebody might make you show, like an attorney, how did you come up with this number? That's what they're being penalized for not meeting the project on time. And again, one of the things I see in an agreement sometimes is not clarification of what's lump sum, what's unit price. They might reference the bid form, they never attach it. So the agreement just has a number that has nothing reference to it. Just make sure you do that as we go through eventually. Whoops, did I skip one? No, sorry. So the supplementary conditions, why do we have this thing at the top? Oh, but I need to do this. Get rid of it? I should know this because I've used Zoom enough, but why is it not happy? Only that I can't say, it's like, what the heck am I talking about now? Okay, so supplementary conditions, there's actually quite a few things that we have in there to modify and add. So that is a big one. And that's where if you use the version that says at the footer, the 23 RD edits, you're not going to get all of these in there. It's really not a big deal, but it's going to add some of these middle ones where it's referencing some things. So I would just say, make sure if you pull up the edits, but just add those all in there. We're going to look for them, but it's mostly adding a lot of federal requirements. But one of the things that it did add was the one at the bottom that's newer that maybe you're not aware of, but we used to have a requirement that, hey, the owner can't split out 50% of the work as a subcontractor, or the contractor can't, excuse me. And without owner approval and RD approval. So let's say, you get a bid and it's primarily like, let's say a tank, typically it was a tank project. They're going to sub the tank out, which is like 90% of the project. You'd have to have approval for that. This actually takes that out now. We still ask for who are the subcontractors. And I think going into a project, we're going to know that, but just be aware of it. I don't think it was really ever an issue, but it did come up as a technicality through a project where it might be that. So the newer thing that we have is, so you've had a contract, the C520 is the normal, a normal construction project that we see. If you have a smaller project, you could use now the C522. We didn't have this before. This is for small projects. So to be honest, in New York, we rarely have a project that would fit this. This would have to be where the overall cost of the project is less than 350,000. I don't know if we have any of those anymore, but you could use a small contracts thing there. But we do have sometimes where someone's going to procure something in a project. So we bid a project out, but they need to procure separately another item. And that could be okay. And if it falls under the $350,000 simplified acquisition threshold, which was in the OMB 200, you could, and you want to use an agreement, you could use this form. Sometimes we just have a proposal and that's fine. We look at that, but we need to prove that anyways. But this is an avenue to use an actual agreement if you want to. But this does not replace the 520 on a normal project when your contract's going to be well over 350,000, which is what you usually see. Yeah, you insert that stuff. Okay, so I wanted to hit on a little bit. One of the things in our reviews, a primary item that you want to see is open and free. So just to reiterate that, that means that basically want you to say or equal. If you list out a manufacturer, you should say or equal, or don't list a manufacturer at all, or be willing to. Now, there's some cases, this is what we call other than normal competition. So you want to use some specific material. That can be allowed in our projects, and we stress that. Primarily, we see that through standardization. So municipality we're working with has always used X hydrants. That's a classic one, or X valves, and that's fine. They can do that. The most important thing they need to do is say why. They need to ask us formally. They should in writing. You on their behalf as an engineer can do that. So a lot of times I see it in the spec. All of a sudden the spec shows up and it's X, brand of valve. That's what we want, or the hydrant. I'm like, okay, then I got to ask the question, why? If they've standardized on those, that's good. So they should do an actual resolution of standardization. They should say, we want to standardize because we've got this on all the other parts of our system or districts, whatever we are. You can do that. You ask us and we go for it. We say yes. That's a real common thing with materials that are inherent in construction. Now, the trickier part is if you want to do some type of specific treatment process. And so realistically, if you want to, let's say you want to use only one certain type of treatment brand, that's where the review of that and acceptance of that really should be done through the PER. That hey, at the time of PER said, we've looked at these different treatment alternatives, and this is the real brand that we want to use and can use. And we would approve it through the PER reviews time. Maybe you can't do that till design. So the other classic one you see is for, let's say, a wastewater treatment plant, specific type of treatment, you're going to build the building around that. And hopefully we said that. And or whatever things you need to work around in building that. That's okay. I would say let us know ahead of time. Two is, ask that that's what you want to do and provide why. I think, to be honest with you, more often than not, what I've seen is that's maybe what they're going to do. You want to do as an engineer, but you might still put the or equal in, but you have a certain process to be able to review that. And that's okay. We might ask you some specific questions about, okay, we still need to make sure that it's open and free, that it's available to anybody, but they have to meet this guidance, let's say, or if they're not going to be this supplier, they give you this information ahead of time so you can review it and see how it fits in. And if you have to change the design, you might make them, it might cost more, and we look at those costs and how they're going to be offset. So our projects, I'll be honest, we rarely see that, maybe 1 or 2% a year. But if you do, let's talk about it. The other way around that I've seen is procurement. So let's say we need to buy 400 grinder pumps for a project. And instead of having the contractor buy it, can the municipality buy it because they can get a better rate? They don't have to worry about it and just give it to the contractor, or maybe a piece of treatment equipment. That can be okay. Let's talk about it ahead of time. Again, if you want to do that, discuss it with us how, and two would be doing a procurement process where that actually is competitive. You could do that. We need to approve the procurement documents. And that's a case where you wouldn't use the construction series, you'd use something else. You can use the P series. We don't say that in here, but we actually have some edits for that. So we could give that to you. So if you think you want to procure something, let's talk, and we could give you our edits that we'd like to see in the P series from EJCDC. You don't want to use the P series. You want to use something else. Go ahead. You got to give it to us ahead of time. Just don't go out to bid and get the stuff and then tell us we got it. you know, and then we have to deal with it later. That makes it harder to justify to our bean counters. So you can do procurement, and I've seen it done, but just like I said, let's make sure you make us aware of it and how we're going to do it. The other thing in our design review that you'll see, we'll note if we're building a building, we'll ask you, hey, are you meeting codes? Often that's required, you know, in the actual plans of what code reference you have. And that's good, but we're going to add, you know, and I'm going to add to that in a second, but we're going to also ask you if it's a building that needs to be, at least from our view, needs to be accessible. We're going to ask you, is this accessible? Can you certify that? And often it will come right on the plans if they've met that. But if it doesn't, we're going to ask the question. Lastly, I don't know why, but in our own regulations, we have a specific seismic requirement outside of what you normally see in the building code. And often when I see plans and we've got a foundation or a building, you know, that needs to meet seismic, they list out the seismic code and all the info from that, from the building code. We actually ask for an additional certification that says you're meeting our 7 CFR 1792. So you're going to see a comment. If you haven't done that, which I'll be honest with you is rare, we're going to ask you to add that to the plans. Our regulations actually say it's supposed to be on the front page of the plans. But most of the time, if you're going to cite code, it's in the structural architectural section. And that's okay. Put it on that first page or that page where it's citing all the other ones. A very common case with our projects is you're going to get a prefab building, or you're going to get a tank that's built by somebody else, the contractor, and that supplier manufacturer is responsible for the foundation design. If that's true, then obviously that's not going to be in the plans. We would ask for a separate certification from them. We actually have like a template they can use, ask us for that, so that it gives us the language that we have that we can say we've met our own code. That's what we're trying to help you with. I have no answer why this is separate. I would think we could just use the New York State Building Code and meet what the seismic is, but we make you say you're meeting 7 CFR 1792. Because I don't think it's any different. And I think it actually goes back to whatever's in the building code, but it's kind of like the circle thing. So BABA. So the other thing that comes up, making sure we meet BABA with all our projects. So I wanted to go over a little bit, and Jessica might be able to help me out with this. She's more of our BABA expert, but we give you the templates for the manufacturer certifications, the contract certifications, and then we actually ask you as engineers to certify it as well, that the plan specs meet BABA and are going to the whole project. And if you're not familiar, BABA has 3 components of what's in what is being constructed that would need to meet BABA. It's either a primarily iron and steel, it's a manufactured project, or it's construction materials. So these are the definitions that are in there. In fact, these definitions we have you add into the supplementary conditions section so that it's really clear what BABA is. I don't know why we can't just reference BABA, but that's what we did. So, but I will stress that I think I'm going to talk about, there's 3 waivers primarily out there, general waivers. There's a de minimis waiver, simplified or small cost, small grant waiver, and there's the minor components waiver. The use of those depends, but a minor components waiver has to be used by the manufacturer. That wouldn't be something that your contractor says, hey, we're using the contractor wouldn't say, I'm using the minor components waiver. His supplier, his manufacturer, his BABA certification say, I'm applying the minor components waiver. So it's a manufacturer thing, just so you're aware, not a project specific item that would show up. So I already said, so we asked for the 3 certifications. We give you the templates that are in there, even the de minimis worksheet, if they're going to use de minimis, which we'll probably need to on BABA project anymore, but it depends on the type it is. Wow, look at that. How did I do that? Did I talk too loud? Here's the sample language. Here's what we ask you to put in. It references the actual BABA regulation that we have to cite, which is part of the Ag Con Act. So the Con Act, each agency has their own citing of the BABA regulation. Manufacturer, blah, blah, blah. So and I think almost every manufacturer now is familiar with it. Supposedly they were involved because they wanted it. So, but they are aware we're going to see these certs. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We ask you as the engineers, do this. We want this ahead of, I'm going to ask this when we do our plan review. So before construction, before even going to bid, we really would like this. So here's the waivers. And this is where we alluded to earlier that, so at this point, we haven't had that many BABA projects, to be honest with you. They're all coming up now. But when we've had a product that couldn't meet BABA, they're like, oh, we want a product waiver. Or they want a waiver, want a BABA waiver. What they mean is they want a product waiver from BABA because the manufacturer can't meet it. And so right now, our guidance is, the answer is put it under de minimis. So your de minimis is in BABA. See if I did do this, yay. So here's a comparison. So in BABA, you can put on de minimis up to 5% of the total project cost up to $1 million. So there's a bit of limitation, but it's better than AIS. AIS was capped at 5% of material costs, and so it wasn't a total project cost. And it also applied to only incidental materials, which is a little tricky with AIS. You had to prove that, hey, this thing we want a waiver for, we really didn't need, but we just need it because we're building it. So like if you came in, we're building a water main project and they want to get a waiver for a valve in line, that's pretty tricky because that's like, that's needed in a water project. Whereas if it was a fence post for some other thing, it's like, okay, I could live with that. So there's some leeway there or difficulty in meeting AIS. With BABA, it doesn't matter. You can put any product on that. But obviously you're going to eat it up. So I haven't had any issues or seen that in construction yet where they're getting close to the de minimis, but we're going to ask you to put it in there. So just like, as I mentioned, we're going to say, put it on de minimis. And then, and we're going to say, don't ask us for a product waiver. Because as I mentioned before, it's a very difficult process and hard. You can get through it, but I don't know if we've seen one. Have we seen one, Jess? Yeah, we haven't even seen one yet. So that came through because it has to come through our agency. And so the process, did I even talk about it? I hope not. We're going to get to that one. So the process, just to reiterate, would be, if we actually say we need a product waiver, we need you as the engineer to go through and say, you've done a search of all availability stuff and shown us, hey, this manufacturer can't make this. This is why, blah, blah, blah. You come through this list. We give that list to our national office. Then they go through it. We've had a consultant do it now, and apparently that's going to go away. So they're going to do it themselves. So they're going to go through that list and do their own due diligence of, hey, is this really true? Is this not available? Then if we really believe that's true, then we got to make a request to our own agency. They have to say, yep, we believe it. And so USDA says we believe it. Then they take it to, I want to say OMB. Help me, Jessica. I think it has to go to OMB. Then they're going to review it and say yes or no. Then it goes to MEO, the Made in America office, and they say yes or no. And that's where, as I said, like there's a joint waiver out there with EPA for water meters from one manufacturer that got issued. We can't accept that as a waiver because it's not project specific. Two is they said because it's not agency specific. MEO has to have everything they said has to be through the agency. There cannot be a generic waiver. Somehow that one got through because there was 2 agencies signed to it, but they told our group that's never going to happen again. Don't do it. So just to give you an idea of what the steps and the time is not easy. But it doesn't mean it can't happen, but I want to say it hasn't happened yet. The other thing that comes up very common at this point of transition is between AIS and BABA. So if the project for us was funded by AIS. That's what we're gonna ask you to meet. And actually in the specs that we've asked you to modify, our references, we're gonna ask you, say, hey, use this cert, but use the domestic preference is AIS, it's not BABA. We're gonna ask you to modify it for that. And then what happens though is we'll have other co-funders that may require BABA. If that's the true case where AIS is required by RD, BABA is required by someone else, it really becomes a BABA project. And we're gonna ask you to follow BABA. And BABA includes AIS, so anything that's BABA is gonna meet AIS, so it's not gonna be an issue. The only potential, not issue, but just kind of nitpicky thing is the cert that we get for precast structures. There's a little bit of how they reference it could be an issue. So we can look at that specific to that department. The other way around though is what I've seen a little more common recently is we funded it as a BABA project, but there was some money from some other agencies and they only required AIS. They're gonna ask you to put in the AIS certs. That's okay, into the documents. We want the BABA certs in there too. If they only want AIS, that's fine. But we have to have the BABA and they can have the AIS. So I might make a comment on that and that's okay. If that's what happens, then fine. And you may have to have 2 certs issued. It's the other funding agency, but we will need to know that you're getting a BABA certification from the manufacturers when we go through that. So some of the wording, you're gonna have some additional language in the contract documents. That's okay with us. And we can go through that review at that time and see. I think eventually everything's gonna work out, but it's gonna take a few years to get through these projects that are funded either way. So now I'm gonna jump to, yes,
Co-funded, is just the part that USDA paying for have to be BABA, or does the entire thing have?
wow, what a good question that I didn't even bring up. That's good. So just asked about, so if a project is funded, split funded BABA, AIS, and USDA, you're saying requires BABA, or you don't care? Multiple funders. So if anywhere in there it says BABA, one of the funders and it's federal, because that's only a federal thing, BABA, realistically. What BABA actually says is once there's $1 into the project and it's BABA funding, the whole project has to meet BABA. That's what it says. Now, I've seen it parsed out, to be honest with you. On the other end, where we funded it at AIS, we're only going to require AIS. I've seen someone else require BABA, but then the other funding agency was okay with splitting it out somehow. I don't know. But if it was the other way around, where we said it's BABA, the whole thing has to meet BABA. You cannot split out, this is our BABA part, this is our AIS part, or anything else part. We can't do that. That's another tricky thing I'll bring up is sometimes we'll get, hey, we've got money from X to do this. We're going to pull that out of the project and do it. Or don't worry. That does, well, this has come up. Hey, this thing doesn't meet BABA. We're going to buy it with this other money. Okay. So that did come up actually recently in a project. And so they said, hey, we got money from X agency to buy a bunch of this stuff. We're just going to get it. But it doesn't meet BABA, but that's okay because, our answer was, if you're going to include it in the project, total funding cost is X, and that's the way the project was funded. We're in it. It has to meet BABA. So you're going to have to put that as a de minimis, that we can't meet BABA because and count that towards that is what they can do as a product.
Even if you break the project into stages?
So that could happen. So the question was, what if the project was broken into 2 different phases? For USDA, I will say that it depends on how we funded it. So if our letter conditions said X, this is the project, this is the money. If that was only phase 1, then yes, that would be true. We actually don't want to know whatever else is happening with phase 2. We don't want to know it. We don't even want to see it. Right, Kim? So yeah, thank you. But it really, in reality, might help and relate to the project. But on paper, we want to say they're not even anywhere near each other. If we funded it and it had 2 phases, hey, this is phase 1, here's phase 2, but it all was a $5 million project that we funded, just for a number, not 250 and 200, 2 million, 2.5, whatever, blah. But No, the whole thing has to meet Bob in them, if that's what we said. Those are good questions. So jumping to, I can get rid of this thing for folks. So in this, how are we doing on time? Okay. Oh, yes. I like it. I'll get hungry here. I hope we have lunch soon. Even if I end early? Yeah, okay. So the other thing in this bulletin, and this is really the new part of the bulletin, is engineering agreements. So now engineering agreements have to meet the E500 2020, but we have a couple other forms, but we're all talking 2020 up to 22. So we'll talk about each one of those. So standardly, we as an agency required the use of the E500 for all our agreements. And we still are, and that's probably the most that we'll see, but it was the 2014 version. From here going forward, we need to see the 2020 version, just so you're aware of it. I don't know I'm asking Liz, do you guys see anything different or on engineering agreements?
Well, we don't require the.
EJCDC, yep, but you're okay with it.
Yes, okay.
I've never seen a problem, but so EFC specifically doesn't require EJCDC. We do as an agency, be aware of that, but they have no problem accepting that. And I think like if I had a co-funded with CDGB, it would be no problem as well that I've seen. So, but we've added a couple types of agreements that we'll talk about here when we could use those. So we're going to ask you, so for the standard normal construction project that we see, you're going to still use E500. We ask you to add some stuff. This highlights some of the differences between them. And I think, so it tells you what, in the bulletin, it says you got to have exhibit A, B, C, E, G, G and J. Geez, I can't talk here. Exhibit D is supposed to be there if the engineer is providing RPR services, a resident project. A lot of this I've never seen any issues with, and we have them in there. I think the biggest thing is that the change that I've seen is the compensation part. Exhibit C versus Exhibit J. Now it's more towards the back end, I think, and they outline what the costs are for the project. We had a specific Exhibit C in the 2014 version. Now in 2020, it moves the costs back, summarizes them. The rest of it's kind of, to me, a lot of the same stuff, but just reworded a little bit. But the cost part, where that's shown, is different. So be aware of that. Now in these agreements, let me go back here. In the agreements, sometimes if we get an engineering agreement, the cost part, we really ask you to fill that out, but the engineer might have a proposal that they had that really identifies the cost and stuff. You can always attach that as an attachment and reference it. That's fine. But you still want to have this summary of the cost so that we can see what's the actual technical services, what's construction services cost, and any additional thing. What did we talk about here? These are some things that were added into it. The domestic preference, that's BABA, that's still there. So there's also this kind of outlier, I think, this telecommunications prohibition, if you're not aware of it. So in the federal, oh boy, I'm supposed to know where it's at. The Federal Code of Regulations has a specific prohibition on things that telecommunications that we might use with SCADA or video at like a treatment plant or a building, something like that. It all goes back to if it's Chinese made and specific Chinese manufacturer. We say you can't do that. It's in the federal. That's why we're making you cite, hey, yes, we will check that and make sure that. I'm going to ask you during plan review as well if something like that comes up. It's not a big one in our projects that we see, but once in a while we'll see somebody wants to get a camera. We have to make sure that it meets that. So a bit of a change though with this new engineering agreement is we had a specific form in there that said, this is where we want the municipality, the engineer's client to sign it, the engineer signs it, and then we sign it. And there's a summary of some of the fees in there. We're just going to do that with a memo. So we're going to reference the exhibit that's in the engineering agreement, and we'll do that with a memo to our own staff. They might share that with you, but we're going to sign off on in New York, at least we made up our own form to do it, one that we've been using. So just be aware that you want to see concurrence on the engineering agreement from us. And as engineers, if if you're in the middle of design for the project and planning to go to bid plans and haven't heard that, hey, did you guys see our agreement? Did you review it? Are you okay with it? Start asking that question, please, because we probably missed it or we just never got it. Jessica and myself, we need to look at it, and or the specialist didn't. So we're going to catch up with that eventually, once we want to go to bid, but just be aware of that. So we're going to concur on it to our specialists, and then they would provide that on to you and say, hey, you were good with the engineering agreement. So if you want to use, so as an engineer, we also have a small projects agreement. So if there's an actual project where the project cost is below 350,000, again, that's a rare project for us to fund. But let's say it did, and maybe it was only technical stuff. You could use this E520, the small projects agreement. And so we asked for some of the same changes that's in there. I don't expect this to be used much here, but it can be. I think others, for whatever reason, other states and USDA have enough projects below 350,000 that people asked for this. And that's why they added it, to be honest with you. In New York, this is really, like I said, rare. I don't know. This could happen though, and this was a good one. So if engineering services are only limited to an engineering report or the environmental stuff, technical type of reporting stuff, you could use this E525 now. We never allowed this before, or if you did it, we didn't really sanction it. Now we are. So you can change it for that. So specifically, like for you technical service financial guys, so we have a search or a PPP grant to do a PER. They could use this agreement. They probably should, is realistic. I haven't heard that they have to, but it would be a good idea to use this E525. They can then pull that in to the larger agreement as an attachment later on for a whole construction project. But so I know that across places, I want to say much rarely in New York have we had people say, why do we have to use E500 when we're just doing a report? And to be honest, and we'd say, well, if that's what our project is, that's what we eventually need. To be honest with you, I think with our search grants, we haven't in the past required it. So I think just gives you an avenue to use. So one thing that has come up, boy, not really in New York, but I think, and Jessica referred to it, design build. So if you've got a project where you think you want to do design build, boy, we would really want to talk about it because we're not too keen on it, to be honest with you. From our standpoint, to meet the federal requirements when we're federally financing something, there's some hoops to walk through to really get through to do that. So we need to know early because if we're going to do this method, we have to involve our national office and get their buy-in, and they have to help us review it. So be aware, if you want to try and do any kind of design build, talk to us early, very early. As Jessica said, the PER would be the best thing because that's actually where we have to prove it. Somebody wants to do design build, they're going to have to do it in the PER. They should. I have yet to see something after the fact. Definitely in New York, not. So if you're not aware, so actually Jessica and I and our whole office is helping Vermont, New Hampshire out as well since last spring. I want to say, you can help me. Yeah. Yeah, so since USDA lost 40% of the people across the country, Vermont and New Hampshire were decimated. So they asked Brenda, can you please help us? So we've been helping them. So I'm just saying, I have seen it come up with Vermont, I think. So design build. So anyways, so we're also working with them, but I rarely see it. But again, just go early. It can be done. I want to say it can't be done, but it takes some work on everybody's end to make it palatable and work through our regulations. So what did I say here? Oh, again, so reiterating our process, just getting down to, so you put together plans and specs, you submit it to us for review, and to your regulatory agencies, let's say, and we've said, yep, go to bid. We actually then say in our review letter now, we're gonna reference, we used to give you a laundry list of stuff we need at award and agreement. we're kind of taking that out because we have a standard list that our specialists use of what we need. And that's in that standard list, and we're gonna give that to you during the review. So that's what I'm referencing when it says WEP construction list. If you don't have it, tell me, we'll get it to you. But it basically tells you what we need to concur on award and an agreement. Just be aware, we're, as engineers, we're supposed to concur. Our regulations, our letter of conditions says, hey, don't award without RD concurring on it. I want to say 95% of the time that happens, but we do have cases where it doesn't. So please don't do it. So, and if you don't, I can't guarantee that there isn't going to be a problem. So just, sometimes we can work through it, but you're much better off. You go to bid, you get an award, let us know what happened. I have so many times that, I have several times where somebody went to bid, we didn't even know it. Somebody has a high bid, we don't know it, or they got a good bid, and we still don't know it until all of a sudden, hey, we awarded, and now what do we do? It's like, well, wait a minute. So look at what we told you. Please, you got a bid, tell us what happened, tell us what you'd like to do. Here's the list of items we need for award. It's primarily give us a bid summary and the engineer's recommendation, and let's make sure that the municipality is on board. Then 2 is you go ahead and do your agreements. There's a laundry list for that. Too bad. One's like 5, one's like 10 items. Again, we as the state engineer, and this is still in the bulletin, we have to sign off on the agreement. So we do that via the municipality has their attorney sign off and say everything's okay. We, the state engineer, are going to sign off. That's been the same process. It's a separate form that we have in our bulletin, and we concur on the agreement. All that goes through, again, through the specialist. So don't think, hey, I got this all signed, it's done, and we're going to have a pre-con. Because sometimes all of a sudden we get a call that says, hey, we're ready to have a pre-con. We scheduled it for X date, and our specialist knew nothing about it, didn't even know what was going on, and for whatever reason, nobody communicated, is what I'm saying. So please communicate. Here's where we're at with award, here's where we're at with construction, with the agreement, and hey, everything's signed. We sign off on it, then let's schedule, it's the specialist schedules with the municipality and the engineer, the pre-construction conference. It's not us, the state engineer. We want to be there, involved with it, but you really got to work through that point of contact. So I'm just reiterating some of these steps, if you will. There's the form that we sign off on. So for the agreement, we want to see the agreement with all the bonds and everything. It's in the list of what we need. The attorney has to sign this. This should be the last thing signed because the attorneys looked at everything and said it's okay. And then we sign off on it. We do get some attorneys that say they don't like this. It's very rare. If they really want to cross something out or say something, have them do it and let's look at it and see if it's really an issue. But it's very rare, but it happens. So you heard some do's and don'ts. So I'll just reiterate some of them. So do use the 2018 version. Don't use anything older, please, of the construction documents. Do submit everything, the plans and the front end specs and everything to us. It would be nice to have them together. And I'm asking you to. Sometimes we get plans and then say, hey, we'll get the specs to you later. And it could be a few weeks. Or we get the specs, not the plans. I'd rather have them all together, rather look at them once, because it's hard to look at them separate, to be honest with you. But if you really want that to happen because you're trying to speed up a process, call us and let us know, and let's talk and see why. And it would be best if you submitted the contract documents. This is like the 90% submission, some people call it, that's fine. At the same time, you're doing it to the other regulatory agencies or review agencies. So DOH, DEC, maybe TFC, whoever's looking at it. It'd be better if you submit it at the same time. Now, let's say I have some projects certainly where DEC's much more involved with a treatment plant upgrade or something like that, and they need to see it sooner. That's okay. We don't need to see 40% plans or 60% plans. You could let us know, hey, this is where we're at with DEC review, but I'd rather see it at the final review at the same time that you're getting it out to them. And then again, check your letter of conditions. That's really key. Anything else you want to say, Brenda? But with letter of conditions, look at that list. There's a whole list of items. Because often I'll get, hey, plans and specs, I approve them, the engineer's thinking, or the municipality, oh, I'm good to go to bid or construct. And no, you got to look at the letter of conditions because I'll be honest with you, the technical side of things usually goes quick and there's a set of items. there's a whole bunch of financial and legal stuff that need to be provided that are in the letter conditions, and make sure those are met, and you're gonna have to help walk the municipality through that.
John,
Yes,
just mentioned that, the letter of conditions is revised now, so it's broken up by sections.
who?
So it's gonna tell them every different section, what they need prior to bid, prior to award, prior to contract concurrence, prior to
Construction,
construction.
and then
It's all
closing?
broken out now by section, so.
And then
it's
is there like a closing section too?
Huh?
Is there a closing section?
Yep.
Okay. So what Brenda was just reiterating, our letter of conditions, so that's really our legal agreement of funding to you folks, although I think there's some other stuff, but that tells our municipalities who we funded, this is what you got to provide, a letter of conditions for our financing. It's going to be broken up into sections of what you need prior to bid, prior to agreement, contract, an award, construction, and then at the final closeout of the project as well. So it's going to be sectionized, so it might be a little easier to follow flow wise. What else did I say here? Yeah. Hopefully it's. So the one in here, it says plans with different scope approved in our letter of conditions. That's actually something that I see sometimes that's a bit disconcerting. So we funded a project to go down X road or some multiple roads for a water main, let's say, or fix up a treatment plant. And I get plans and all of a sudden there's something extra or different in there. Boy, no, please know what was approved in the letter of conditions. And if you got to change something because of design, please talk to us ahead of time before you submit the plans. I'd rather not know what, be surprised. I'd rather not be surprised with it. So, and if that's true, we're going to need to walk, if there's some serious changes, we're going to need to walk through to make sure we can document it via a PER amendment or addition and make sure the environmental review is okay. And some of those things might say, no, we can't do it. So be aware, if you change some scope, holy cow, let's talk about it, please. Because that can really be a serious problem. It rarely is a serious problem, but it can be, and it has been. And so just if you think things change from what we funded, please make sure we know about it. And then lastly, please do not go out to bid without the RD specialist concurring and telling you to go to bid. Because usually the issue is there's some legal stuff or financial stuff that we didn't have, or we don't have, if they didn't get clearance, maybe you didn't know. Well, all of a sudden you're ready to go to construction, and the biggest thing I see is, help me out there, you two, the preliminary bond docs, right?
Yes, our attorneys have to issue closing instructions.
So the bonding documents, the legal documents, the bond stuff, we haven't maybe seen, or it still hasn't gone through our own attorney. Our attorney has to review it. That can take months. Okay, 2 to 3 weeks, Brenda said. So just, I've seen a couple projects, ready to go to bid, and the contractor's ready, and he's all rare, and I was like, wait a minute, we don't have this, and it's not a technical thing, it's a financial legal thing, so.
RD requirement.
Right, so just make sure you got clearance to go to bid, because that has to be in place. Okay. Any online questions? Any questions out here? Oh, you guys are too nice. Okay, Jacqueline.
About on average right now, how long is it taking to complete the technical review for contract documents?
Ooh. On our end?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, our standard answer is 30 days. We're supposed to have 30 days to review it. So I'm going to ask you, when do you want to go to bid? Typically, we're going to ask you that and say, what do you need? Because we probably would flex things based on that. If somebody's like in hot water and really needs to get out, and another applicant, we're going to probably try to prioritize. So we'll prioritize based on that. But in general, we follow that. So 30, but I'll be honest with you. I'm hoping we can get it done in 2 weeks. I've got some sitting there that have been there for a month or two, but that's because they said, oh, we don't want to bid till summer. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit on these because tell me that's different or why. And I got somebody that says, I want to bid next week. I'm like, okay, what do you have for regulatory approval? What do you have for all this other stuff for our prior to bid? I'm going to ask that because I'm not going to kill myself to review these or Jess isn't. So what? It got there, but you still can't go to bid because you don't have all your other junk. So we're going to ask that. But I think 30 days is our standard, but we can get them done pretty quick if they need to be. We're going to ask why. I want to say, if you think that we, USDA, is the delaying agency, if you think, hey, RD's holding this, we're stuck because you guys, let us know. We do not want to be that agency. We shouldn't be. That's regulatory agencies and stuff, that could happen. That's their bailiwick. I've been there. And that's a different story, but we do not want to hold up a project as long as we got all the information that we need, that you've given us what we asked for, you meaning the municipality, whoever, the funding stuff. So I think we can make it go quick if we need to, but we're going to make sure why. But if you need something right away, ask us. Let's talk. Nothing online. Wow, they must be bored. So,
So, John, Jeff, we just emailed you our web submittal checklist that I wanted.
oh, good.
We didn't put it in the presentation. but-
No, I didn't, because it was, I didn't put a link. So you got a link to it, Jeff?
No, it's not.
Okay, can you put it in the chat? Let's see. Okay, so the WEP construction checklist that I mentioned
Yeah.
is a document that you can go through as a checklist for New York to be able to say, okay, this is what I need to get the bid and construction. And I used to reference some of those target items in our review memo, and we pulled that out and said, here's the general, because this is what the specialist is going to look at. And we give that to the folks. So we're going to, and I put a link in the review memo, but we'll have it in the chat, as well as we'll have it in the documents, the slides available to folks. Sure. If you can pull it up. So Jess is going to try and pull it up and see if it'll work, since we have maybe some time. I'm hungry. No, it's like we got. So we moved through this quicker than we thought. That's fine. I think a couple of things obviously happened that we didn't have. I will say we didn't have as much environmental information as we had hoped at this time when we planned. So that held up a little bit, as Tom alluded to. He's a little bit hand-tied with what he can say is also what we just don't know. We're in limbo with the environmental stuff. So, but no, this we hope this construction checklist. Wow, look at that. When did they have to do the review? Okay. Can they do it now, or do they have to wait for you to talk? Oh, okay. So don't do this yet, guys. Oh, what? I didn't know what that was. What, am I singing a song or something? It's like. Yeah, I don't know how quick. Is it a big file? I don't think so. Brenda, do you know?
John can do a good Johnny Cash, he did win. Didn't you win that one year? Johnny Cash?
I could have, I don't know. That's fine. I hear the train come. But thank you all for attending. Let me say that here in person. We really appreciate that. That's nice to see faces, because post-COVID, it's like nobody wants to go anywhere. And then two is, but thank you to SUE, the Environmental Finance Center here, Jess and all their team. Thank you very much for your help in putting this together. They really, from our end, do a good job. They relieve us of a lot of stuff that we couldn't do, and we appreciate that. So thank you for hosting this and making it happen. We rely on it. So thank you to them all, and use their services. And I will say, she mentioned, so we work with them kind of in an indirect way, but they can help a lot of folks and work cooperatively with engineers, with financial people on how to help a project come to fruition. So don't hesitate to use them. They're a technical service provider for us, and so along with RCAP and with Rural Water. So right, Brendan, did I hit them all? Okay. So use them, use these services. All you folks, engineers, don't hesitate. They're going to help you get projects through, and we've had them now. We have a lot of engineers using Catherine and helping out to get projects through application and beyond. So How we doing?
I have them put on.
Hi.
And then if you guys, if you want to say anything as well, you can think about it. I got, one online question and then we'll go through the platform.
Okay.
The online question, when will,
When will the new version of letters of conditions be implemented? If they are easier to understand, could a community with an old version LOC request a new one?
Unfortunately, no, I can't give a new one.
Okay, she can't give a new one, sorry. I know, but
If it's under the old letter of conditions, there should be the old prior to bid, prior to construction letters, so the
Right.
area specialist should still be issuing those
Right.
old letters that, we used to have the letters in the
Yep,
LOC, now everything's in the LOC.
okay.
So if it's an old LOC, they should still be getting those separate prior to bid.
So if it's an LLC that's already issued and under quite the old format, what happens is there's separate prior to bid letters and separate prior to construction letters, right, Brenda? That are specialist issues. And you're probably working on that. So if they're in the midst of trying to go to bid, let's say, that specialists should be giving, hey, here's the updated prior to bid letter. But now that's all buried in the letter of conditions sectioned out. So we can just refer to the letter of conditions. So can't update an old one is what Brenda said. But there will be, you're going to go, and that's actually, I reference that sometimes. I say prior to bid letter, because that's where the checklist items are. And then when are we implementing this new one, Brenda? So it's anything as of when do you think it was?
Some of the ones we did last year are actually.
Really?
But
So
as we did the ones-
our fiscal year 26?
Yeah.
So pretty much anything from, after October 1, which through now has the new letter of conditions format. So anything we funded in our fiscal year 26 and beyond is going to have it.
Yeah, there might even been a couple at the end of 25, but I don't know when we exactly. turned
Okay.
over.
I forgot that we changed all that and put it together. So it doesn't like it, does it?
I think you have to save it. Did you save it on your, you have to save it on your, try that. Oh,
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I dragged it onto the desktop.
Okay.
Yeah, only if you save it, you can. Is that John's picture?
No, it's hers. Oh, I'll tell you what. Go open it up in like a browser. Why not? So that stinks. That's how I make Adobe work. Adobe stinks otherwise. Yeah, but doesn't like her version of Adobe. I feel.
It's like right here. Yeah, you have it. Yeah, that's it.
All right.
No, you are. You did it.
Hey, Kim, why don't you go?
I was talking about you.
Come on, Kim, you don't remember this. I can't do it. There we go. Okay. So this is we call it construction checklist. So, excuse me. So then there's obviously then this is kind of separate, but the PER and any budget stuff, the Form E, that was done prior, when we funded it. But obviously there, that actually, okay, we'll get to that. Then you got your prior to bid section here. So I can, and that's where, hey, we need the new agreement, the E500 on the 2020. And look at your Rust Bolt with the revisions of 2024. And like I said, you can actually get a revised version directly from EJCDC. But it tells you what it is and where they're coming from, right, Brenda?
The letter of conditions refers to this. So the letter of conditions now mimics what's in this construction checklist.
So here's all the priors. So SE means state engineer. So we're going to certify that the engineering agreement is okay to our specialists. They're going to get that. The certifications for the engineering design, that's the highlighted Russ Bolton. I talked about that today, plans and specs. The WEP authorization for release to bid. That's what I'm telling you. That's what you want from your specialists. If you're ready to go to bid, you got all your regulatory approvals. That's a big thing. To go to bid, we need regulatory approval. So be aware of that. For what you want to do. And they're going to confirm that person, we got the as-bid stuff. So there's a check of what you need. Wow, 6 pages. And then at construction so we went through everything. So pre-construction conference. No, wait a minute. Oh, I did. That's what I was saying. Wait a minute. Where's everything? Thank you. Sorry, guys.
Type 2 in the.
I like it. It's 4. It's 3. It was 2. Thank you. Sorry about that. So here's the laundry list, 17 through 26 roughly of what we used to ask in our plan review, but in terms of the contract documents, what we need in terms of the agreements and awards. So we need, the board resolution of the award, notice of award, the agreement, payment performance bond, all on the 2018 EJCDC forms. That power of attorney that comes through the bond stuff, that's separate. The owner attorney form, I showed you that, where the attorney signs off for the municipality, we sign off on it as for RD. Inspector, and then we still ask for a SWIP if it needs one, but I think we want to make sure we got all the other items too, but that is specific we have. Yeah. Go too far? Scroll up. I gotta do 2 fingers. I'm trying to remember. I think that's what I'm not doing. There's construction. Okay, so then we concur on the construction contract, that list. Here's the list, and then we go to pre-con. We have a guide to go with that. Many of you are familiar with that. We'll give you that. All these items we need to go to construction. Then during construction, the monthly payment estimates, so the pay apps along with our Form E, tab sheets, certifications. Go ahead. It actually highlights a couple of things I need to discuss or just mention. So one thing I didn't mention was IAS and BABA in terms of us. If we funded a project by BABA or it becomes a complete BABA project, let me back up. An AIS project, what we were doing is we actually asked for the certifications from you folks, the engineers, and we needed to we need you to give them to us along with pictures of the product with Mr. USA stamp on the product, and we do a site visit. We had to do that if it was an AIS project only. If it's a BABA project, we're not going to ask you for the certs. We're not going to ask you for pictures. We don't have to give anything to our national office. They were smart enough to change it with BABA, which was good because there's going to be a lot more stuff. And so we're just going to ask you it probably regularly at the progress meetings. Hey, is everything going okay with BABA? You getting your certs or whatnot? At the end of the project, we want the contractor certification, actually with the final payout. That actually changed in the bulletin as well. I didn't bring that up, it's a note. Whereas I think, and help me out if you don't mind, Liz, EFC wants the contractor certification at the time of the contract, right? Early on in the contract and the construction.
Contractor cert that we.
Yes.
Yeah, just to put the contract.
That's actually, you actually asked for that in the bid, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So just be aware. So the contractor certification for AIS or BABA is the other funding agencies might ask for it during bid. We ask for it at the end of the project, although we ask for the manufacturer service before that. Dave, sorry.
Yeah, so we just did a CDBG project.
Yep.
And they were requiring BABA certs with every pay app. It was like
Ooh, okay.
That's something that's gonna be.
Interesting. So the question was, a CDG project that was just done or in the midst of, they're asking for the BABA certs with each pay app. So a contractor cert. So it's interesting you say that, only because I've seen that in Vermont, New Hampshire. Now I'm looking at their pay apps. Jessica and I have that regular with each pay app. The other, if it has like SRF money, wasn't even CDGB, it was SRF. They want a cert in each pay app. You guys don't ask for that, right? Yeah. So, yeah, right. That's what we're doing. So no, we won't ask for that. If you do, fine, we'll see with the pay app. That's okay. But we won't ask for that. We wanted the contract one. Now the manufacturer certs, we also don't want to see, but we might ask for a couple, like Liz just said that, hey, we don't look at them or how they're looking. We don't want to collect them is what I'm stressing with a BABA project. That's a difference. So here, you saw it on this checklist. They have the AIS site visit and that's going to change to, if it's only a BABA project, we just cross those off. We don't need those. So how are we doing here? Let's see. This is during construction, change orders, like you said. Project sign. If you've been involved with our projects, we just want a photo of it. Everybody has their own project sign. That's the way it goes. There's a whole laundry list here of what you need for closeout. Be aware of that. And that's what we get once we get to the final thing. And then what's the last page? Just more closeout stuff till we get there. Anything you want to stress here? You two? No? Okay. Any other questions? Wow, way to go. Jess is gonna fix things because she might want to say something here at the end. But thank you all for attending. And like she said that, so I haven't even seen your YouTube site. So they have a YouTube site that'll have this in there.
Yes, correct. We have a YouTube channel where we will upload all of these files. We will send out I will send a follow-up email to all the registrants with where to find this information. For our in-person folks, if you could just complete the evaluation with that QR code. For our virtual attendees, when you close out of the Zoom, you'll be automatically directed to a third-party survey to complete the evaluation. We really appreciate this feedback. We do analytic reporting for our funding agencies, so we'll give you a report. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Yep. Don't hesitate. Other questions or email. We're ending.
Ending. Yes, we are ending. Lunch is ready. Oh. I'm gonna end the meeting. How do I-